want to go ahead and in case there's any problems with there he is. Okay. Can you see us, Joshua?
Everybody that's in the audience, please make sure you sign in on the sign sheet.
Oh. You're on mute, Joshua. There he is.
There we go. Sorry, I was just making sure all my setup was working here. So it looks like I can hear you and you can hear me.
Okay, can you see the screen behind me?
I see a white blur.
But you don't, can you see the whole screen or just part of the screen?
The bottom.
Just the bottom. Okay.
Yeah, like the bottom foot.
Please make sure your phones are on silent.
I don't know if I can. Oh, yes, I can. I can raise the camera higher so that you can see the whole screen. Because you're going to need to see the screen to tell Crystal when to advance on the presentation.
Okay.
Let me, we'll start in a couple minutes. I'm going to see if I can raise the camera. Earlier, come in. Okay.
Yes.
One of you say something. I think I've got the camera too high now. Oh, here we go. Okay, he can see it now. But you can't see any of the words that are on the screen?
No, it's just a white blur. I have my presentation up, so maybe if we can just use like PDF page numbers and stuff like that. I think maybe that's a good way to just make sure we're on the same page as we flip through it.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we will start the meeting at 6:02. What just happened? Hold on. There we go. Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, and as usual, I have not asked anyone to do an opening thought or prayer. It's by standard operating procedure. Any one of you has something to say? One of you three. You?
Yeah.
Me? Okay, all right, let's stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States. To the republic.
Let me pray. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this beautiful day, for the moisture that we received and the moisture that appears to have about received. We pray that we might continue to be lots of this abundance. We're grateful for all the many wonderful blessings that we enjoy, particularly for the opportunity to live in a free country and to be able to meet publicly and voice our opinions. Grateful for this and pray that was given us in this meeting, we might be civil and considerate of others. And I ask these things in the name of Jesus Christ.
So before we move on, I want to just make a note on the agenda. I would like to move under old business. I would like to move item B in front of item A. Any objection? No? Okay. All right, so when we get to old business, we'll do item B first and then A. Okay. Does anyone have any declaration of conflicts of interest?
Now,
Okay, Misty, nothing, Paul? And I have potentially a conflict of interest on letter A, but I feel that I can go ahead and vote on that issue. All right, so council comments. I have a few things I was gonna make comments on. Does anyone else have any comments that you wanted to make? You do, Paul, go ahead.
It's more a question than Leroy, and I'm sorry to hold it before the meeting, but I saw two different financial statements in the folder on SharePoint. And they seem to be different numbers, but which one is the one we need to look at? I assume the later date was the one I looked at. As the one correct.
that should be the later date. That the accounting numbers on.
That's what I figured. I wanted to make sure.
Is that it? No comments from you, Misty? None from you, Leroy?
I just wanted to go over the financial statement and just the income portion. They indicate that in January, we showed a revenue of $25,816. That's after expenses, and year to date of $356,862. And that will indicate that we should have sufficient cash flow and they apply for the new water tank in March to hopefully get that grant. As most of you know, a grant, you receive 50% of the grant ends up as the loan. So you have to still cash flow to service that part. And we're ahead of the budget. At this time, we should be at approximately 58% and of the budget and income, and we're at 75%. And we should be at 58% of the budget and expenses, and we're at 45%.
Okay. Jean, any comments from you?
Just seeing a pretty major slowdown. Yes, in the economy, like these new permits, a lot less dialogue from folks calling and asking about property for sale.
I just wanted to make a few comments here that, let's see. Cameron had asked several times for us to get a light over here at these steps, and we now have lights there that are motion sensitive. So anyone who goes out the back door tonight when we leave, the lights will come on. And I just was gonna let Cameron know that he's not here tonight.
He's here.
Where? Oh, here you are. So Cameron, you got what you asked for. Okay. On Pocketville Road, I had priced doing rumble strips because we We're trying to slow down traffic there, and I had gotten prices on rumble strips, and those were going to be somewhere in the neighborhood between $20,000 and $30,000. And when I talked with some of the people that live on Poplarville Road, they said they would prefer speed bumps. And so we priced speed bumps, and those were $5,000. So a huge difference in price for speed bumps as opposed to rumble strips. And we did find out that the rumble strips, they really prefer those for temporary events and not for permanent installation. So we were looking at speed bumps now. And I know that in the past, there have been statements about potential lawsuits if people have damaged their car. But we figure as long as we put up enough signs and paint on the road, speed bumps ahead, that we would do well. Yes? Okay. So I would like to be able to order those and get those installed by spring break, before all the heavy tourism starts on Poplarville Road, and put a sign up that says, speed bumps on Poplarville Road, please use Co-op Terrace Road 1 mile ahead, in addition to the signs and painting on the road. Any objection? No? Okay.
Want a motion to approve the dollar?
Oh, no, not right now. This is just in terms of comments. I just was asking Pete if he had any
And I-
objection to that.
Mayor, and I think what you have is not truly speed bumps, that are speed cushions.
Cushions, yeah.
And so the only other comment I'd have is make sure we follow the uniform traffic control device manual on setting up the signage and setting up the bumps.
Okay.
The cushions.
Okay, well, Utah Barricade's gonna come and help.
Okay.
They're gonna come and do everything for the installation.
Do they feel like a cushion when you drive across one?
I don't think so.
Depends on the type of rig you have.
Okay, and then, I told you guys before back, in December, I think that we got $50,000 grant to replace the roof on the town hall and update the air conditioning, heating and air conditioning. And so we've sent it out for bids. The bids are due March 8th, and we will open the bids and award the bids at our work meeting on March 9th. So we worked that out with the dates, so that we can get it going soon. And I have one other thing that I was going to say, and I forgot what it was by the time I got out of my car and got inside, so I'm sure I'll remember halfway through the meeting. So if there's no other council comments, we have to be on to item D, which is the consent agenda. Did any of you look at the minutes to review the minutes? Did you have some changes? What about you, Paul?
I've already made the changes.
Okay. Either of you? Okay. All right, so then a consent agenda. I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is the minutes from our 3 meetings in January, plus approval of the checks and invoices for January.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda, item D, and items 1 and 2 under the consent agenda, the minutes, and also approval of the checks and invoices for January 2023.
Do you have a second? I'll second. All in favor?
Wow.
Okay. So we're in open forum. If there's anyone who has something they want to say to bring before the town, something that is not on the agenda, then feel free to come to the microphone. Okay, I will assume there's no open forum, no comments, so we'll move on. We have item F. Dean Woods asked for us to put on the agenda to talk about his water bill,
He's not here.
but he's not here.
Yeah.
So,
We'll have to read it.
okay. I wasn't sure if you were about to say something. No, okay. So we will wait, and if he comes in, We will wait. If he comes in later, we'll come back to talking about his billing. All right, so next item G is, an update from Heath Snow on his, discussions with the Water Conservancy District about burden.
So, as the council had requested, I have had an opportunity to sit down with, Zach Renstrom and Jody Richards, the district's council. We discussed the different options. And the first meeting was more of, feeling, trying to get a better idea on what the, town's desire was. I expressed to them that the preference would be to have the full benefit of the contract that the town has under its 1997 agreement with the district, the ability to have a full 1,000 water connections, not to exceed 100 or 1,000 acre feet of water. And to utilize the impact fee and the user rate schedule that's been developed under that agreement, but that we also wanted to look long-term at the exceed the connection limit. We talked for a good while about whether or not the town would be interested in expanding the 1997 agreement, possibly if there was some ability to, on the town's part, to either acquire some additional water and give it to the district, or have a couple of developers who have indicated their ability to access it. So that we can expand under that agreement. However, any water right is gonna, if it goes into the district's pool of water, they're gonna have to take and make adjustments out of their the wells that feed the town. And he felt like that there was right now that there was a possibility that we could possibly expand 1, maybe 200 more connections that way. But then he couldn't see that agreement could continue to operate more than 1,100 connections. And I said that my feeling was from the council that would be kicking the can down the road a little bit and not ultimately having a pure backstop on where the town's water sources would be. We met again, and I indicated that we wanted to know what if there was a scenario whereby we could have all the water that's committed to us contractually under the 97 agreement and be able to operate that way, plus also join the pooling agreement now. We met again, and after Zach had spoken with his board, he indicated to me that he felt like they would be willing to honor the existing agreement, all 1,000 connections, and allow us to join the pooling agreement. And that, so really our need to take water from them on and purchase it on a wholesale basis would only occur once we had utilized all 1,000 connections, and that while those connections were still available, that the impact fee charged would not be the impact fee charged under the regional water supply agreement, which is considerably higher. And with the standard requirement, we're gonna have to pay the latecomers fee. I asked him to, I told him that Leroy had, as a town, we had kind of spitballed and thought he indicated that our thinking that fee was around $200,000. He thought that was roughly the same, that he would get us an accurate number on what that would be. So I felt very good about the idea of continuing on with what we have, but also joining the pooling agreement immediately. I mean, most municipalities, they've got their own water sources, resources, water rights that they own, and they will only purchase from the region, under the regional water supply agreement when they need it, or in areas that they can't serve with their existing water rights. I like this. We're able, it's as if we had our own water rights, but they're contract rights essentially. And I think it will allow, give us the guarantee that we have the ability to gain, to have water beyond the 1,000 connections that we have right now. It will likely, you know, we will have to decide, and Zach said that he could have a couple of individuals at the district assist the town in coming up with a calculation. We could conceivably have a situation where we're buying water from the district wholesale, and water that is above and beyond what is the water that we get under the 97 agreement. And there's going to be two different costs. And are we going to have a bifurcated water right or water rate? Some users within the town on one rate, other users likely in new developments at a higher rate, or do we blend those together? And so that everyone pays equally the same. He indicated that that's what Hurricane City does right now. They do a blended rate because they are purchasing water wholesale. Plus they have their other water rights and how their, you know, their cost to produce water versus having some of it, you know, just wheeled into their system from the district is, there's two different costs, but they've calculated out one fee. So that would be something that we would have to deal with down the road when we get to that point. But I think that frankly, impact fees, that increase is not necessarily a concern of the towns. It will be borne by new development. And that will be just a cost that they will need to know upfront. And when the current connections at the lower impact fee that we're supposed to be charging under that is used up, then it would be, they'd have to plan in their development as they're financially penciling out what works and what doesn't work is the increased cost, which my understanding is going to be about $10,000 higher in the impact fees. The other point that Zach made, and I was aware of this because I sit in a monthly meeting with the city attorneys for the cities that are members of the pooling agreement. They're going through the process right now. And it's a long, arduous task, but they're going to amend the regional water supply or pooling agreement. And one of the things that the cities have requested is currently the agreement allows the determination on who joins the regional water supply agreement is vested in the water district board, not in the member municipalities. And they want that changed to be a vote of, so if anybody else wants to join the pooling agreement, the other municipalities get to vote on it. That is currently one of the provisions that is in discussion. There's a draft of that change. There's been discussion on whether it's equal vote per municipality, meaning that for instance, Tokerville, who I represent, have the same vote as St. George City, or whether there be some sort of weighted vote because of who buys a lot more water under the regional water supply agreement. However, either way, Zach suggested that if we were going to join the pool, that it'd be better to do so before that amendment comes into place, which I would guess is probably 3 to 4 months away. And while the district board can approve it, and they've already indicated to Zach that they would honor our 97 agreement and allow us to join as long as we pay the latecomer fees. So I told him I'm pretty confident that the council would be interested in doing that. I asked him what he saw as the next step forward. He said, why don't you talk about that with the council, and if they're in agreement, then put a proposal together in bullet points, what we just talked about here today, and I will get formal approval from the board, and we'll have Jody, the district's council, the addendum to the regional water supply agreement, adding us as a member municipality. So that's where we sit. I was very positive. I thought that we would have to, he may want, or that the district may want to either blow up the 97 agreement and put us all onto that, or that we would have to negotiate some of our remaining connections, which we have somewhere right now, not counting what we may or may not have committed to, with current development approvals being about 350, that we're able to keep them all. No negotiation, I guess, if we wanted to discuss a minimal reduction in exchange for the latecomer fee, we can do that too. But his suggestion was that some of the larger projects in town, for the benefit of knowing that there's a guaranteed water source when we exceed 1,000, it may be something that we could discuss as far as a condition of future approvals, maybe some contribution towards that latecomer fee, because they're going to be using the water that comes under the pooling agreement. And that's what it costs to get into the pooling agreement.
Okay,
So what do you need from us when we do that? If you guys like that concept, which I would hope you would, I walked away and thought this is pretty much the best of. Frankly, I thought that the district would want a horse trade and negotiate a lot more than they kind of rolled over, in my opinion. That we probably ought to not sleep on it too much, and if it's meets with you guys' approval, then I'll put together kind of that bullet point proposal and circulate it for input from the council, and let's get it submitted to their board and on their agenda.
We would probably have to bring the bullet point and do the vote here, but council meeting, so next month. The vote.
we could do that, but I feel that some of the town people should have a chance to get some input,
And
the residents.
that would be the March meeting, we take a vote on it.
Yeah, if we want to have a public hearing, that'd be
Yeah.
good. It's a fairly complex. I mean, I'm open completely. I think I'd love to have, and that's why we're discussing it publicly,
Mhm.
but and take comments. They would need to prove. I think the public, before they give some really good feedback to the council, they need to fully understand the 97 agreement. And what it means under this regional water supply agreement that currently is 95 pages long.
So I want to make sure I understand. Cliff Notes is basically, we continue with our agreement, we sign on with the pool agreement now. And when that runs out, then we have water.
Yeah, and I tried to make it pretty
Not
clear.
unlimited water. just
Nothing's,
water.
nothing's unlimited for that.
Yeah, nothing's unlimited.
Okay.
But I tried to make it very clear. I want to make sure that I understood. I said, okay, so for the next, 350 or whatever connections we have left, we're not charging, collecting or remitting or sending them down to the district to pay the impact fee that's chargeable under the pooling agreement. We're sending them or having them pay and or provide receipt of payment, the impact fee under the 97 agreement, right? You're not asking, and he agreed. I said, are we paying, we talked about how there's the $2.25 surcharge. Are we having to pay any sort of surcharge on all of our users? He wanted to think about that. He didn't think that there would need to be, I think our proposal is, we don't pay anything. We're only paying that surcharge once we meet the 1,000 connection, but that we've joined in our obligations under the pooling agreement. Yeah, I want to make sure that I understand that aspect of the surcharge. We were pretty clear on the impact fees collecting for the next 300-400 connections are going to be under the 97 agreement. Whether they are going to make us collect and remit an additional $2.25 surcharge even on our existing water users, that's what I suggest that our proposal is no, it's not, they don't, and let them try to.
So,
Devil's always in the details. That's why I suggest that we give this bullet point proposal to them.
so when you say not the surcharge on the existing water users, any of the additional 350 would pay the surcharge?
I'm
No,
gonna suggest
even the
that we-
1,000 connections,
Yes,
none.
1,000, everything's treated, all the water supplied to us sufficient to service the first 1,000 connections are not charged a monthly surcharge to our existing water rates or anything like that. That only water, when they bill us for additional water for additional connections beyond 1,000, that's when the surcharge applies, and it applies only to them. Going forward, they may come back and say, no, at that point in time, once you trigger it, everyone starts to pay the automatic 225 surcharge. But
Would you-
let's propose on
Okay,
that one.
okay,
I mean,
because if they're gonna make us pay, go back and calculate the surcharge all the way back to 2006 on our existing water connections, why would they turn around and say, oh, but you don't have to pay until you, but that makes sense. I can't believe they agreed to that.
I acknowledge and agree. All I'm
But we
saying is
can
that we should. What I always tell my kids, I'm like, what's the harm in, I guess there's no harm in you asking, but the answer is no. So I think that's what we should put it on the proposal.
Okay,
So, could you do a written recommendation so that we could have something to show the public if they're going to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to have public comment and we're gonna vote to authorize that proposal, I'll have it done and ready for whichever meeting. Are you talking about is there gonna be
he's
a
talking
work
about the
meeting?
March.
Do you think we need to longer than the March meeting, which would be the end of March?
No. But I would push it beyond, I would push it into April and May.
But you were thinking you could have something for our work meeting in March? Okay,
Then that might be.
If we're
a good
gonna have
time.
public hearing, we need to have like 10 days prior to.
no, I'm just talking about something just for the town council to look at and our work. meeting
We're not
in March.
required by state law to have a per se public hearing, and so we're not set on a mandatory 10 days in advance public notification. We can have it available to the public 4 days before our meeting and still allow them to give some comment on it. But if you'd like, I am happy to have it available for the work meeting in March.
Okay.
And then you guys can look at it, and that way you can throw it up on the public notice website too, a copy of it.
Okay,
Well, you need more
Actually-
resolution, or what do you need from us?
I know a lot while we're still negotiating, I don't know if I want to put all of our cards out into the.
Mhm.
Just for everyone's, interest, the, town started putting away so much of the impact fees from the water in case we had to join them.
Yeah.
And we have $206,000 there.
Okay.
So moving forward, do you need anything for us for a resolution or anything, or just
Just wait for the meeting.
Let me read this to write it and you guys look at it with the schedule. But we may, I'm gonna be honest, we may want to have, we have the ability to, because that's the acquisition of land or water, is one of the reason for an executive session if we wanted to do it closed. I know we want to deal with this as open as possible, but while we're still negotiating terms, I want to make sure that we negotiate our best deal, and if the district knows everything that we're willing to do or not willing to do, it may not be our best deals.
Okay, all right, before I move on to the next item, which Josh, that'll be you doing your presentation. I'm gonna go back and adjust this camera back down to what it was before, since what he sees on the camera is just a big white blob. You can't see the birds at all. And meanwhile, all of us are completely cut off. You know what? They can just see my top of my head on the screen. So I'm gonna move the camera back down and then we'll go on. So I'm gonna pause the recording here for a moment while I adjust it, because otherwise it's gonna go all over the place. Okay, Josh, you need to unmute yourself and then we will let you. Hold on a minute. Okay, Crystal, you need to bring up this wastewater study. You want to introduce yourself?
You bet. Is that better? Did I turn it off?
You'll see a green light on the top.
It should already be
You're on.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Mayor, council, thanks for having us tonight. For the record, I'm Joe Phillips with Sunrise Engineering, and then remotely we have Josh Nelson. He's up in Logan. He's the brain power behind the study that we prepared for you. We'll present tonight. So background wise, for some number of months, we've been working on a wastewater master plan update. The direction from the town when we began the process was to look at a number of different alternatives with an unbiased approach, to just let the numbers speak for themselves as far as what we would recommend. And one of the options that we looked at was and evaluated was a continuation of what you're doing now, and that is the use of septic on-site system management programs to dispose of wastewater in the community. Another option, or the second option that we were asked to look at, was doing localized collection and treatment here in the community. And then the third option was a regionalized option where we would collect wastewater here in the community and then send it off-site to a regional treatment facility. So we've looked at a number of those things. Ultimately, the conclusions and recommendations are that number one, you're not in imminent danger of having a nitrate overload in your groundwater, although that time is theoretically coming. The second conclusion was that you should continue, our recommendation is that you continue to require the commercial developments to treat to a 90% reduction on nitrate for their wastewater. And then the third one is that as you go into the future, the town ought to begin looking at and thinking about regionalized treatment. Based on the numbers, that one appears to have the best life cycle cost analysis over the long term for the community. And so Josh will walk through the process here on the screen on how we got to that point and why we made those recommendations. And just of note, as we went through the process of this study, one thing that was important to us and to the community was that we had regular progress meetings and coordination meetings with the town, which we did. Gene and Mayor were involved throughout the process. And so what we're at tonight is to just present what we found, answer any questions, and try to make sure that everybody understands what the findings were and they're able to move forward with confidence in this study. So with that, we'll turn the time over to Josh. I think we'll be able to hear him and see on the screen what we've done. And then I'll just stay here to answer any questions and with Josh's help, of course, we'll go from there.
Okay.
For the time, we're done.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, council. We appreciate your time this evening.
Hold on
Um,
a second. Can everybody hear him? Yes. Okay, so I can turn the volume up if you guys need it. Okay, go ahead, Josh.
Perfect. So up there on the screen, hopefully we see our cover page there, Virgin Town wastewater study. This was the 2022 update. Let's scroll down now to page 4 of the PDF, the executive summary. This kind of summarizes a bit about what Joe just spoke to, gives an overview of what our approach was in this study. If we go down to page 5 of the PDF, page 2 of the report, it's kind of the project background. One of the studies we kind of read through was that 1997 determination of recommended septic system densities, and that was actually kind of previously mentioned in this report. Part of this is what informed that 1997 water agreement with Washington County Water Conservancy District. And this is what set development to a limit of 1 unit per acre for the town of Virgin. The other study we reviewed was the 2015 Virgin Town wastewater study. And this was the study which we used and which our study updated to kind of get a glimpse now in 2022, where are we at in terms of some numbers that study presented in terms of wastewater moving into the future. So let's scroll down now to page 7 of the PDF, page 4 of the report. How I was kind of planning on working through this body of the report now is we'll go through, we'll look at the tables that gave us all the information, and then we'll look at all the exhibits that are in the appendices. And then at the end, if we need to bounce back and forth between a few different tables and exhibits, we can. But I think the easiest thing as we scroll through it is look at all the tables in the body of the report, then we'll look at the exhibits to kind of piece it all together. So the first thing we did was we wanted to get a good idea of the growth rates in Virgin. So we looked at 2 different things. One was the historical population growth, which we can see in table 2, all the way back from 1940 to this most recent census in 2020. And then if we go to the next page, we also looked at Virgin building growth through through building permits that have been issued over the last several years to get an idea of what the growth rate has looked like in Virgin. If you look at the historical population growth, the rate varies greatly decade to decade. And then if we look at the building growth, we can see if we look across all building categories over the last 5 years, we get a growth rate of 3.32%. And discussion, after discussion, we determined this was the rate we would use moving forward to project growth into the future for sewer calculations, because this would help us accurately depict how many connections were being added to the town rather than population, because populations can grow and shrink in different ways as opposed to building growth, which is kind of 1 connection per building. So that's the growth rate we decided to use moving forward into our study. And then below that, figure 1 is just a growth trend line to show how that would affect the number of buildings in Virgin from now and 50 years into the future past 2070. So if we go to the next page, table 3 there at the bottom, the next thing we did was we wanted to analyze the existing system and the existing conditions that Virgin has in their town. So with the help of Council Member Jean, we broke the town into several areas, A through O, to get a count of how many residential septic systems or potential residential sewer connections there are in the town, as well as commercial connections. So we created an exhibit, which is exhibit 2 in our appendix that I will show you later, to help divide up the different areas of the town to help get an accurate count of what Virgin system looks like today in terms of septic systems and potential future sewer connections if the town decides to go that path. So next page on table 4, we see the Virgin ERU calculations. ERU is an equivalent residential user. So this is a way we equate commercial uses to residential uses, because like your hotel in Virgin, the Marriott, it uses obviously a lot more, produces a lot more wastewater than what a residential house uses. So to make everything on the same playing field, we assign everything an equivalent residential user value. And that's what was done in this table. So you can see on the top of there, each residential connection is just one ERU. So we have 399 current residential septic systems. And so we have 399 residential users from our residential flows. And then the commercial, that's where we kind of take one commercial building and expand it out into several ERUs. So from our 18 commercial businesses in Virgin, we used a study and numbers to determine that those 18 commercial buildings act as 375 ERUs. And so it's pretty close for your residential use equaling your commercial use in the town of Virgin. Scrolling down to page 8, table 5, we created a table to project the ERU growth into the future. The equation we use to do that is above the table, and we projected it out over the next 50 years as far as how we believe residential connections will grow in the town, as well as commercial connections, and then your total ERU count there on the far right. So if we keep scrolling down, the next thing we did was the mass balance analysis, and this was updating numbers from that 2015 study that I mentioned earlier. And what a mass balance is you take, you're trying to determine the quantity of something in a source. And so in this case, we're trying to determine nitrogen levels in groundwater. And so what we do is we take nitrogen and all the different types of water going into the groundwater to determine what the nitrogen levels are in the groundwater. So I like to think of it like making a cake. You add several different ingredients, and what's in the cake is just a sum total of all those ingredients. What's in your groundwater is a sum total of everything you're adding to it. And that's how you can get a calculation of nitrate levels in groundwater. And all that text is just describing that process, assumptions that were made in that process. So if we scroll down to page 13 of the PDF document, page 10 of the report, table 6, those are the mass balance results. And so from my calculations, we determined that there's roughly 3.18 milligrams per liter of nitrogen in the groundwater currently. And we recommended, as did the 2015 study, that 5 milligrams per liter is that benchmark that we should be aware of. So today, by our calculations, we're determining that we're well below that level based on the current residential ERUs and commercial ERUs. The commercial ERUs, you can see that broken into 2 columns, one called standard and one called 90% removal. The standard was what we determined were commercial buildings that were installed prior to the date that the requirement for 90% removal was implemented. And so those 120 ERUs don't have the 90% nitrogen removal, but the rest of them do. And as you can see, all the growth happens in that 90% removal requirement. And then the total ERUs and how we got to the 3.18 milligrams per liter. So with this projected growth trends that we've determined in Virgin, we're projecting that Virgin will hit that 5 milligrams per liter mark with 961 residential ERUs and 900 commercial ERUs, which equates to 562 additional residential connections and 26 additional commercial connections based on current averages. And so that growth can be seen in figure 2, which is on the next page. Obviously, we tried to get an average of what your average commercial site's seeing and residential seeing, and that's when we determined that 5 milligram per liter mark would be hit in 2049 based on current growth trends. And then figure 3 below that is just graphing your total ERU count and the nitrogen concentration growth over time. So on the left vertical vertical axis, we have the ERUs. On the right vertical axis, we have the nitrogen in milligrams per liter. The green line is the nitrogen and the orange line is the total ERU. So you can see how those go hand in hand. When the ERUs go up, so does the nitrogen concentration in the groundwater from septic systems across town. If we scroll down to the next page, table 7, I did an alternate analysis. I was just curious and wanted to look at what would happen if Virgin did not require that 90% nitrogen removal, because that is very expensive. It's an expensive cost for commercial users to pay. So I wanted to see the effectiveness of that plan. And so as you can see, if that wasn't being required, we project that the town of Virgin would be over that 5 milligrams per liter in present day under existing conditions. So that kind of reassured me of the importance of that requirement for 90% nitrogen removal for commercial entities, because that's what's helping Virgin standard that limit right now. And then as you can see, it only climbs from now. So I did that analysis to ensure that that requirement had merit. So then the next thing will be kind of like, well, what does this mean? How can we grow? And so that's kind of what we show in figure 4 on page 16 of the PDF, page 13 of the report. I kind of wanted, because Virgin can grow in 2 different ways. It could be all residential growth or all commercial growth or whatever fits best for your town. So I wanted to kind of create this graph to show those differences. So across the bottom axis, the x-axis there, those are the commercial connections. And then on the y-axis on the left, those are total connections. So you can see the more commercial connections you add, the blue residential bar gets smaller, even because of the rate at which these commercial connections use much higher, produce much higher volumes of wastewater. And then that will allow you to help kind of determine how you want to grow into the future. So if you want to add more commercial businesses, you're just going to have to limit residential growth under current conditions using septic systems. The next thing we looked at was potential areas for higher density housing. I know as towns grow, there's often a need for places to build more houses in a smaller area. And so we wanted to look at, with the soils that are in Virgin, where would these areas be possible if there are any. And so what we did was we looked at the United States Department of Agriculture's website for the Natural Resource Conservation Services Web Soil Survey. Sorry, that's a mouthful there. And so what they've done is they've mapped soils all across the United States, and they give them ratings for a wide variety of things. The first thing we looked at was their hydrologic soil groups. And what this is the ability for a soil to produce rain runoff. So it's telling you how much rain flows across the top of the soil versus is infiltrated into the ground. And they rate their soils A, B, C, or D. And I've provided this map in an exhibit that I will show kind of at the end of this report. And then they also provide ratings for septic density, where they actually rate, I think their rating for septic density is, again, A, B, C, and D, where and it's color coded to show which one is most favorable for septic systems and which areas are least favorable for septic systems. And then in this body of the report, we also discussed kind of the Utah state codes for developing wastewater systems and where Virgin could look to possibly allow for higher density housing in Virgin. Again, all that would have to go through individual site soil testing through the local health department, because that is who administrates the Utah state codes that governs installation of septic systems. I will be sure, we'll go over that information again when we get to the maps later in the presentation. So the next thing we did after we looked at the mass balance results and kind of where Virgin was at now, we wanted to start looking at what are the options for the future? What can Virgin do if they decide to go off septic systems and go to a more sewer collection based system? So the first thing we did was we looked at the contours, the topography of the land to develop potential wastewater collection basins and determine wastewater flow rates that will come from these basins, both today existing if a sewer system was installed today, 20 years into the future, and then at the build out condition as well. So if every acre of land was used up according to current zoning and Virgin, what would kind of the flows look like that they produce? So table 8 on page 19 of the PDF, page 16 of the document shows what existing wastewater flows would look at based on the wastewater basins that were created as part of this report. And we got a total projected wastewater flow of 183,390 gallons per day of wastewater. Then we took that growth rate we talked about earlier and projected that in the future to see 3.32% for 20 years, what flows would look like then. And so we added growth to some basins, more to others, as well as commercial growth based on how Virgin's been growing in the past to get a total projected flow in 20 years of 352,886 gallons per day. Sorry, I skipped page. So that's those 20-year projected wastewater flows, table 9, page 20 of the PDF. On the next page, we have some tables that were used to determine the build out of the town. So what we did was we created a map to help determine how much developable acreage was in Virgin. So we took a map, we overlaid the zoning, then we overlaid sensitive slope areas. So where you can't develop on slopes greater than 20%, we took out roads that have already been developed. And we created a map. So per wastewater basin, how much developable acreage is there per basin by zone? So that's what is in table 10. So you can see wastewater basin C there is a good example because it has a variety of zones through it. There are 18 acres of agricultural zone, 5 acres of commercial zone, 65 acres of highway resort zone, 193 acres of open space, 38 acres of residential zone, and 313 acres of rural residential zone. And these are as zoning exists today. So obviously zones change and that would change the results of this, but this is kind of a snapshot in time to look at if the zones didn't change and Virgin was fully developed, what would this look like? And so table 11 shows the zoning densities per day with a few exceptions. The exceptions are marked by the asterisk, and those are the commercial zone and highway resort zone. The reason I didn't use the minimum density per acre under the zoning and your ordinances is because hasn't been how things are developed to the minimum size. I used a more realistic approach of what's there now to get an average of your average development on the highway resort zones using up 10 acres. So I didn't want to count them in the future using 1 unit per acre when they're right now using 1 unit per 10 acres. So using that and creating that map, we were able to determine your total build out connections and your total build out flow rates, which are on the next page in table 12 and 13. So we have a total residential connection under build out conditions currently of 2,004 residential connections and 58 commercial connections, producing a total flow of 755,668 gallons per day.
Table 13.
So once we got those flow rates, we were able to move forward and kind of identify some different plans and alternatives that the town could do moving forward. So the first thing we looked at was alternative on-site treatment. And this is there's a variety of systems that are sold to help treat wastewater on site. So they're like high-end septic systems. They work very similar. A unit would be installed in a residence yard. They have a small little pump with them, estimated to cost $2 to $3 per month in electrical costs. And then these treat those nitrogen levels to a higher level, thus prolonging the amount of time a town can stand septic. The downside to this is the cost we were given was a modular unit to treat a 4 to 5 bedroom home would cost around $30,000. Larger homes and 4 to 5 bedrooms would add an additional $5,000 to $10,000. And that's, if I'm remembering right, it removes about 30 to 40% nitrogen. If you wanted those same 90% nitrogen removals on, you have to add a polishing unit that would cost an additional $15,000. So if you required residential unit users to have these systems on it, kind of the base cost would be, and you wanted the 90% nitrogen removal as well, the base cost would be about $45,000 per home. And then there's some fees from the Southwest Public Health Department associated with those as well. So that was kind of the first thing we looked at, just to present information to the town to have options moving forward. The next option was facultative lagoon treatment. This is a pretty common use to treat wastewater here in the state of Utah. Water is collected, pumped into a series of lagoons where, through a natural process, wastewater breaks down, and through evaporation and everything, a biological process occurs to clean the water. And then that water can be either put into an evaporation pond where all the excess water is evaporated off. It can be placed into a water source depending on the limits you're allowed to introduce into that water source. Or there's also some options for application to certain agricultural products depending on what they're used for. So that's what that talks about. And part of that, a concept plan was developed to determine what a sewer system would look like to collect wastewater in the town of Virgin, and then how it would get to a lagoon treatment facility. The next option was a transmission to regional treatment, and that's something that's a little easier, where all the wastewater would be collected and then you would pump it out of town to something like the Ash Creek Special Service District, and then they would be responsible for treating all of that wastewater at one of their lagoons that's already existing today. Both these options require a Virgin town to install a gravity sewer system. On page, sorry, I've skipped ahead a few pages without announcing it. I'm on page 26 now of the PDF, page 23 of the report document. We phased a gravity sewer system for what that might look like and cost like to install. And then both of these systems, you could either pump to a lagoon treatment facility or pump to a regional treatment facility, depending on how the town decides to move forward. We kind of designed the sewer system in 4 phases throughout different parts of the town, which we will show in the exhibits later. And then if we go to page 28 of the study, table 14, we also did a probable cost analysis to determine what this would cost the town. So we did the 4 phases of the gravity sewer system, as well as the lagoon treatment facility and the transmission to regional treatment. Phases 1 and 2 of the gravity system we estimate to cost around $7.5 million. Phase 3 would be $5.5 million, and phase 4 would be roughly $3 million. The construction of the lagoon treatment would be just over $6 million, and transmission to regional treatment would be just about $4 million. With each of these, there are different operating costs that are discussed in this. For example, if you went with the lagoon treatment option, you'd have to have a licensed operator on staff to manage those lagoons. If you did transmission to regional treatment, you would use the special service district staff that they already have in place to operate your system, and you just pay their fee to do that. We did a cash flow analysis to help determine what kind of options, what user rates would look like, what loan options would look like, and grant rates would look like based on interest rates for building different phases of the gravity system, as well as working with the lagoon treatment and facultative lagoon treatment. And that cash flow summary for the year one of what those payments would look like is found in table 15. I have a bigger one later in the report that's a lot easier to read, I'm guessing, than this one is. And then the next section, which is page 30 of the PDF, page 27 of the report, those are the conclusions and recommendations. Joe touched on them earlier in his introduction. So essentially, from our calculations and the update from the previous report, we've determined that Virgin Town right now being on septic is not causing any issues with nitrate in the groundwater. It's at 3.18 milligrams per liter compared to the recommended levels of 5 milligram per liter. We recommend that Virgin Town continues to require 90% nitrogen removal for all new commercial connections to help protect those levels in the groundwater. And from a mass balance perspective, Virgin could support higher density septic systems than 1 unit per acre, as long as the town doesn't pass those limits of equivalent residential users. That would push it over the 5 milligrams per liter. Also, with that, individual sites would need to be tested to determine site-specific soil properties to determine what size of septic systems individual sites could support. So now I'd like to move on to the appendix and the exhibits to kind of put pictures to all these words I've been talking about. So if we could go to exhibit 1, that's on page 33 of the PDF document. Is that up on the screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. So this was first just to get an overview of what Virgin Town looks like as far as a land ownership perspective. Lots of private land and lots of BLM land. Then you can see the municipal boundary there with a little sliver of state-owned land there up on the top. Exhibit 2 was the exhibit I talked about that we worked with Council Member Jean to develop to determine the existing conditions of septic systems within Virgin, to determine how many residential connection systems there are and commercial systems. So that was exhibit 2. We divided the town into these areas A through O to help keep track of where growth was occurring, where there's existing houses and commercial units. If we could move to exhibit 3. So exhibit 3 is what I was talking about as far as areas that would be more, have the possibility of having higher density septic systems. So this is a hydrologic soil map. And so each of those colors represents a different rating of soil, rating A through D. Rating A means that it has a high level of infiltration and a low level of runoff, and then it goes down till D, and D would have high level of runoff, low level of infiltration. And infiltration is just the rate at which water can filter through the soil in the ground. So exhibit 4 is the NRCS rating for septic systems. They kind of gave three ratings, color coded green, yellow, and red. The green means they do not anticipate any limits for septic systems, meaning that the soil conditions that they have mapped are great for septic systems. Yellow is somewhat limited and red is very limited. And then gray, unfortunately, is a lot of areas that they have not rated for soil due to lack of data. And so obviously in Virgin, there's a high percentage of this land that's not rated. And the part that's rated, not limited, and the best for septic systems, most of that has already been developed. Our recommendation as far as determining what other areas would be kind of looking north of Highway 6 or north of Highway 9 and doing additional soil testing and sampling to determine if these areas would be better for higher density septic systems. If we move down Exhibit 5, page 37 of the PDF. Exhibit 5, these were the wastewater basins that were delineated based on the topography of the land in Virgin, with keeping in mind kind of how a sewer system would be laid out. And that's actually what is in the background of this exhibit is a proposed sewer system. And we'll get into that more in the future in the next exhibit. So this is kind of basins A through L of kind of how sewer system would be grouped together as Virgin grows if they decide to go this route. Exhibit 6 was what we discussed to determine the build out condition for Virgin. We took the basins, overlaid the density or the zones, the different zones that are in Virgin, and then we erased the sensitive slope areas where no one's going to develop on slopes higher, steeper than 25%. We erased out different roads and roads to determine kind of how much developable acreage there is within Virgin town boundaries. And that was used to help us calculate under build out conditions what volume of wastewater flows would Virgin produce. So the next exhibit, Exhibit 7, this is kind of the layout of the entire Virgin proposed Virgin's gravity sewer system. All the green lines are 8-inch gravity sewer pipe. The yellow lines are 10-inch gravity sewer pipe. And then the purple line is a 12-inch gravity sewer pipe. And the red lines you see are 6-inch forced sewer mains. And then there's several lift stations marked by the red circles, and then a regional lift station, which is marked by the red square. These are all proposed locations based on our preliminary analysis. This isn't necessarily what's going to be constructed right now. So if things aren't in the perfect spot, that's probably why. This is just kind of the high level analysis we were looking at. So all the smaller red lift stations, their purpose is to get all the sewer in Virgin to one location, which is that square. And then from there, we will show later how it would be either pumped to a lagoon treatment facility or a regional transmission facility. Exhibits 8, 9, 10, and 11 show the different proposed phases for which the gravity sewer system in Virgin could be constructed. Phase 1, we started on the far west side of town, north and south sides of the highway, and went as far east roughly as to where some of that commercial development is currently happening. I believe that's it's called I forget the name of it, the Buffalo Resort or something like that.
Yes.
Perfect. So down in that area. So phase 2 of the sewer system would be kind of more the center of town, up around the cemetery, down by post office. So all the way south down towards by the river. All of this would flow kind of towards that lift station that would be needed for that resort area we were just discussing. That would be constructed as part of phase 1. So phase 2 would all just be gravity lines. If we go down to phase 3, Exhibit 10, that would be what I believe is the Rio de Sion development on the south side of the river, as well as some remaining strands of development along the north side of the highway, as well as down by kind of the Marriott Resort and I believe the KOA and some of those glamping sites on the north side of the highway. And then phase 4 would be the very far east, remaining east side of town. Some of the commercial developments along the highway and residential users along the highway on the far east of Virgin. So those were the 4 kind of phases we recommend if Virgin decides to install their sewer system in a phased approach. Exhibit 12, facultative lagoon treatment, shows that whole gravity sewer system, as well as how the sewer would be pumped from that regional lift station to a proposed site for the treatment ponds. We estimate that you'll need, if I'm remembering right, it's roughly 30 acres to build these ponds for your sewer treatment site. And then if we scroll down to exhibit 13, this is a bit more zoomed out. This would be the proposed alignment for a pipe from that same regional lift station over into a connection with a wastewater manhole that is in Laverkin. The system would be pumped to this location, and then the Ash Creek Special Service District, it would flow from there into one of their current lagoons. This pipe would follow the proposed Zion Regional Trail that's being considered at this point. So as part of that trail, this sewer line would be buried underneath it, and it would follow that alignment. And then from there, Appendix B is calculations and our cash flow analysis. So if we it shows the calculations and what I did for the mass balance analysis, the breakdown of all the math that's there. And then Appendix C is the cost estimates and cash flow analysis. So it's all the spreadsheets breaking down the different quantities and units for how I got the pricing that we went over earlier in the report. And then if you go to the very last page, that is the cash flow summary for year 1 of a loan for the different options of either building the phasing of the sewer treatment, as well as the different treatment options, whether it's regional treatment or lagoon treatment. So to discuss this, the monthly user rate, and this is all explained in the report, there's a calculation that's done that the state of Utah uses to determine what they believe the max user rate for a sewer system in the state of Utah should be. It has to do with the percentage of the town's average income, which we determined to be roughly $68.83 per user is what that user rate would be. And why that user rate would be that is because once you hit this max limit that the state of Utah has determined, then they put a lot more effort into getting grants for the town rather than additional loans, which would end up raising user rates higher. So what I did was I kept that user rate common, and what you'll see is the loan and grant amount changes to determine what your payments would be for installation of various systems. And again, this is just a snapshot of what year 1 and these loans would look like. The PDFs previously have the whole breakdown of year 1 through 30 of the loan, and kind of how with growth, how that affects payments and all of that fun stuff. So for example, the lagoon treatment, if you just built phase 1 of the gravity sewer system and you wanted to do the lagoon treatment, you actually can't cover the project with just, you'd have to get 100% grant money to fund the project. Any type of loan, it would push you over the user rates required just from an operation standpoint of the system. So that's why that loan amount has a dash and the grant amount's the full price. Just the estimated operation rates are high enough that the 6883 alone itself wouldn't cover the operation of that system. And if you went up to phase 1 of the transmissional to regional treatment, you'll see that it's still a very high proponent of grant money versus loan money. to fund that due to, again, just not being enough users in the system to fund the project. So
Josh,
That's-
what page are you on?
58.
the very last one,
The very, very last page.
65, sorry. The very last one. So all the yellow columns there, that's for the different phases of transmission to regional treatment, and the orangish color is for the different phases of the lagoon treatment. And it just kind of breaks down the different loan cost aspects and from a financial perspective. So that is the analysis we did for our report for this 2022 update for Virgin Wastewater Study. And I'd like to know if anyone has any questions.
I might just add a little bit of context too. So, in case you didn't know, nitrates in groundwater are important because it causes methemoglobinemia, which is also called the blue baby syndrome. What happens is the nitrate in the bloodstream doesn't allow oxygen to be uptaken in the system. And so for especially small individuals, babies, they can die from the lack of oxygen to the blood cells. So, and then the other piece of that is we've identified the limit as 5 milligrams per liter of parts per million, our target limit in this study. That's what was on before carried it through this one. The EPA's actual maximum contaminant level is 10 parts per million. So the 5 is half of what the limit is. And once you get to 10, you must start treating and reduce the nitrate levels. So we prefer, as council with you, obviously, like getting up to the 10 and limiting that. The last piece is that Article 13 of your water supply agreement has a groundwater protection piece in it that is controlling your density allowance.
Okay, I had a question on page 12 of the report, table 7. On page 12. This is, so this is where you were saying that if we change nothing, that we're at the nitrate concentration of 5.05 now.
So that is if you weren't requiring the 90% removal of nitrogen on commercial connections. So that's if you go back in time 7 years and remove that restriction, that's where you would be at now. So that's why it's so important you have that restriction in place.
For the commercial, okay, and then on
Yes.
page 20 of the report, where we were talking about the more advanced wastewater system for residential. When were you recommending that we start using that? This Orenco Advantex.
There isn't a recommendation as far as time to start using this. This was just another tool to have in your tool bag per se as solutions to nitrogen in groundwater. So if you didn't want to go the gravity sewer system approach, then this was an alternative that you could choose to help longer protect the nitrogen levels in the groundwater.
Right, so assuming that we didn't go with the gravity system, we didn't go with the lagoon, we didn't do any of that, we just stayed with septic. We should start using this in the next few years.
So, or let me find the table real quick and we can go there. So if we go to page 11 of the report, with our mass balance approach and calculations that we looked at, we projected hitting that 5 milligram per liter mark in 2049. So you would definitely want to start installing those prior to this so you don't get close to that limit because of the dangers of nitrogen levels in water that Joe discussed earlier.
Okay.
So it would be prior to that date. And that's what the mass balance approach we took, the assumptions and calculations we made, and 2049 is when you'd hit that limit. So you'd want to do it prior to then. 5 to 10 years prior to that would probably help you be safe towards getting people to start installing those systems.
Okay,
And they can also be added on to current septic systems as well. So if you have a septic system at your house, this could be added on right after the septic system and help treat water further. So it's not just something that could only be installed on new growth, but it is stuff that could be installed on existing systems as well.
thanks. I have a question from the audience that I'll let you ask, and that's the only one that I'll take from the audience.
So my question is on this particular system, is that based on our current 1 unit per acre requirement?
But
So it's so you're asking if the report's kind of based on the density requirement of 1 unit per acre. And the answer is yes and no. It's based on right now it's based on how it's been built to this date. So I didn't go through and check what the densities have currently been developed as. It's just when I created those basins, if there was a house there, it counted as 1 residential user. And if there was a commercial user, it was 1. I didn't look at density. Going into so that's to get to where we are like today in existing time. Into the future, yes, I followed the zoning densities that were set forth by that are in the town's code, which is on page 18, which varies from 0.28 acres in the residential zone to 1 unit per 40 acres in the open space zone. So those were the densities that were used in the calculations for the report.
any questions from town council?
I just want to say thank you, these guys. It's been a long, arduous process. They've done a great job on it.
Paul had something.
I don't have any questions, but I need to read the report in detail and think about it. So if I may have questions in the future, I know we can always bring them back at the meeting.
Sure.
Right.
I assume that they can ask you further questions, Josh.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because I was gonna say, the only people that have read it thoroughly at this point are me and Jean. So, okay,
If you do get to a point as a town where you want to go for funding, Utah Water Quality Board funds wastewater projects. They are interested in having septics not be proliferated in the future. So there are some options there. We're just finishing a project up at Duck Creek. Incidentally, all of Duck Creek is on septic systems. And this spring we'll finish the punch list on that construction project. That project was funded. It's about a $5.5 million project, and remember $4.5 million was grant money, and then about $1 million loan for 30 years at 0% interest. So they do get pretty aggressive with their funding if they have it available, and if they're interested in, from the state perspective, in having the project done. There's no promise on what you'll get, but if you do get to that point, there are some options out there.
So what's the timeline for applications? Usually once a year at some point?
Yeah, what you would want to do is, the applications for water quality board go anytime. They have a cycle where they look at them at certain board meetings, and that's every quarterly, I believe. But in the town's case, you would want to be talking to them years in advance, so that you start to work on the process and help them understand why the need is there, and then work with their board and with the staff and basically grease the skids and make sure you've got an avenue there.
The mayor stepped out for a minute. We want to thank you. We appreciate all the work you've done, the time you spent with us tonight to explain it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your business.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much. And thank you to Mayor Jean and Councilmember Jean, who were invaluable towards making this report happen. So thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay, the mayor asked us to look at item B before item A on business. And it's zone change for Justin Christensen, zone landing subdivision of B 2139-B, currently rural, residential to add an STR overlay. And we'll accept public comments first before the council reviews it. We'd like the public comments to be about 3 minutes and only one time you can come up and make comments. We have any comment?
Where's it at? This is the property on the other side of the water tower between Pocket Hill Road and.
And this, okay.
Couple comments on item B and we don't have any, so we can move on.
Okay. All right, so what does the council have to say on item B, the zone change for Zions Landing? From rural residential to STR overlay. Well, I will say something. Out of the ones that are presented here tonight, this one has gone through the correct steps. We've got their preliminary plat that we approved on September 22nd, 2022. Planning Commission approved the preliminary plat, and then September 28th, the County Council approved the preliminary plat. I believe that you had contacted us once to set final plat approval and then pulled it back, and we didn't do the final plat. But then you
working through the checklist.
and then you submitted the zone change application in October. And we're just waiting on the final plat. So where are you on that?
Yeah, that is correct. So I mean, we are still in the process of designing the septic system because it is a collection system. We put that on hold because there was so much around the moratorium and the STO overlay. We didn't know which direction we were gonna take this or if it was gonna get approved. So that all kind of, got paused. And so we are now, again, after the moratorium got voted down and the STR thing got voted down, we are working through that process to develop out the system. It'll likely be a raised bed system, which, takes some time to engineer and develop.
So when do you think you might be ready with final plat?
I mean, engineering, and it's about a 4 to 5 month process because you have to go back and forth between water districts and get approvals. So, I mean, I would ask for a year before final plat, that is, you guys have waited forever for your wastewater study. Things don't happen overnight in construction. My proposal that I have from the engineers, they said 5 months. So we would have been done by now, but, we put everything on pause because there was so much up in the air about, the STR and the moratorium. It's $40,000 to just design the system. We didn't want to spend $40,000 if this wasn't going to be approved, if it wasn't. So, we put that on pause until we actually knew this was going to go forward.
Okay.
I think I talked to you guys early on. Are you planning to connect you have a map up? Can you throw up one of the maps? Any of them that shows the subdivision itself in detail?
One of the preliminary plat maps?
I tell you the number, but there's nothing on it. Preliminary plats.
And this is something like that one?
Exactly.
Okay. I picked out page 2 of 4.
What was the question, Gene?
So we initially talked, I remember, about the fact that we've got residents currently cutting across that property and rescinding Possibly connected roads.
There's easement at the top, so if you look at that, there is that easement, it would be a future connection.
Okay, I see. So it just on the north side, or the south side?
Correct, so whoever develops that future property has that access easement, up above.
You're talking about here, you're talking about this bead, you're talking about this bead. You're talking about this.
No, there you go. Right there, Gene. But,
Oh, there.
And that's the easement to the water tower.
right, you've got property owners here and here that are currently cutting. Across that, we're just wondering if you can connect them or.
No, this would be the plat, I mean, they can cut it, you know, if they want to, where that, I think it's between 10 and 11. I mean, that's gonna be the easement, it would be their access point, and they can use it however they choose beyond that.
So the property owner above that town, whoever allows them to go through that. area.
Correct.
Okay.
And you'll see here, I mean, we are doing a collection system, so, you know, in the future, if the town ever does decide to put in any sort of, you know, septic system, it actually it's a huge benefit to the town. We have, you know, manholes and all the, you know, septic, so we have one connection point, to tie into the future system if that ever happens.
So the purpose that is here for tonight is for an STR overlay zoning designation that would overlay be on top of the current zoning that they have. And in our ordinance, in chapter 60, it discusses when that type of zoning would apply, and its purpose is to apply to new developments. Unless and until we have a final plat, we don't have a new development per se. I think that we could approve a zone change request, but it has to be conditioned upon the final plat being approved. You've heard tonight from the applicant that he anticipates that they need a certain period of time to get their wastewater collection system designed, and so that they can have a complete set of construction drawings, which is part and parcel of getting a final plat approved. So, you know, I would have no problem if the council were to consider granting the approval, but would request that we do put a condition that the final plat has to be approved and recorded within X number of months. I think would probably be the ideal way to do it. Taking into consideration final plat, either the developer would have to bond for the public improvements, or they'd have to build the public improvements. So it's not just designing. It's designing the building or designing and then getting estimates of cost and bonding for that.
And that's part of getting the final plat.
Mhm.
Yes, okay,
Yeah, because those roads are dedicated public roads and.
okay. So what I was thinking, this is my thought here, that, you know, our town code has a limitation. And you're aware because what happened in the past where you got approved for the preliminary plat and then time passed and then you had to start over again. So we have the thing in the town code about 6 months and if the preliminary plat expires, but because he was delayed, and the 6 months would run next month in March, since we approved it in September. But given the delay, I would have no objection to adding another 6 months onto that. That's my thought.
I mean, this septic's gonna take another 4 to 5 months, so I mean, I would prefer to ask for a little bit extra time, right? There's stuff that happens in construction and this, you know, we are doing a collection, which is actually a benefit to the town long term, which adds extra time. These systems are a lot more complex than an individual septic system on a lot, so I would ask for a little bit more time than that.
Mayor, I would also tell you that the 6-month requirement is between approval of preliminary plat and approval of final plat. You get a final plat approved, then they go out and start building, you get construction drawings and final plat approval, and you start building the public improvements. The recording could happen. You know, if it takes them 6 months to build on top of that, you could conceivably. So I guess my point is, I'm suggesting that on the zoning component, the STR overlay zoning designation, that we put a condition of approval that it be a point in time when the final plat is recorded, because only upon recording do you actually have a new.
So not
subdivision.
approval from the town council.
It's not approval. And so when you're using 6 months, you're using the time period between approval of preliminary plat and approval of final plat, which
It's too
we rarely ever have, unless someone were to bond and have their engineers really up on cue with engineers estimate of cost and working with the drilling company. I can't imagine that a final plat records within a month of approval, and that's if they're bonding for the public improvements, the
Okay.
building them.
I understand. So 6 months is too short, okay.
So the recommended condition, if we impose it, that would apply to the short-term rental. If he needed an extension on the final plat 6 months, he would have to come back next month for that. We'll do two separate things, so.
Yeah, this is development.
If it's only not for the final plat, he still has to deal with that for next month if he wants.
And we allow with one extension.
I'm not sure, is that what it is?
I think it is just one.
And I'm not sure if our ordinance requires town council approval for that, or does it just require zoning?
So like 20 pages long, so.
I mean, and on top of that, would we, if there's only 6 more months and our, engineers are saying, 4 to 5. I feel like we got held up through the moratorium, the short-term rental thing.
Yeah, we understand.
So given, I would ask for more than 6 months.
Make sure that you got the process down, like you
Yeah.
didn't walk out there assuming that you got both approval.
Yeah.
So, the part where it talks about the 6 month is 1808. 1808A4.
A4.
A and then number 4. Approval of preliminary plat shall be valid for 6 months from the date of approval. And then I'm looking for extension. I don't see anything about extension, but it doesn't.
It talks about it in 1810 D, because I can't remember this where it talks about it references it, says that without a time extension, no unsatisfied objection or this is the topic in the house.
Well, I think then we're open
Open time.
on how long the extension can be. I would recommend that we extend repetitively, but let's give them an open runway to, reasonable time period. But Paul is spot on that an extension of his preliminary plat approval period in which to bring the final plat, that's something different, not on the agenda tonight. It's on the agenda tonight for the STR overlay.
I understand, but we were talking about how long were we going to give them for the final plat to be approved for, so.
And he can come in and make a request. If he thinks he needs longer, then he can bring in and what the facts are for that. Unless we're prohibited by ordinance, doesn't really are. We can approve.
But it doesn't say unlimited extensions.
No, but But depending on the facts, if he said we need 7 more months, we can say, okay, that's a good thing, yeah. Or,
Yeah, let's let him come in. Let's let him come and apply and ask for extension and then designate how long and articulate why.
Okay, all right,
The town council, they're the ones who actually grant the approval and grant extension.
And I believe that it was done conditionally, the approval was done conditionally based upon the septic design. Oh, yeah, I'd have to go back and check though. I think that was the case.
okay, so. So our proposal is to grant the short-term rental overlay zone conditional upon recording of the final plat within what? He has asked for a year.
It's in the middle, how's that?
There's a lot of stuff that's out of my hands in this, and I don't want, the code or something to change.
with the year and the short term rental.
I'm all right with the year two on this.
Okay.
And I have some other proposed amendments, but I don't know if there's a motion on the table, but I can run through.
No,
those.
there's no motion on the table. I just wanting us to get to an agreement.
So you're basically saying I was compromising when a compromise wasn't needed.
Right,
Well, since we're the applicant, yeah.
the applicant requested the year seems, I mean, if it's granted, then yeah. I do have some other amendments consistent with what I did last time on short-term rental. So I can run through those again, or if you want to wait till you get a motion on the
I was
floor,
gonna say,
they want
we
to
need to
get a
get a
kind of
motion.
consensus. on
Do you
which
guys have
one.
any other questions for me?
I don't.
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Okay. Will, you know what? Will he,
If he needs to jump in, he can jump in.
okay, all right. Okay, so I will take a motion then. I'll take a motion that we approve the short-term rental. Well, I'll let you go for it.
I make a motion to approve the short-term rental and giving 12 months to record it properly,
Record the final plat.
record the final plan.
I'll second.
All right, why don't I run through the amendments and see if we got a consensus on it,
Okay,
as we did last time. Hopefully it is. The last time I said, I made a motion that, for each house will have 3 off-street parking spots, and if more than 4 bedrooms, then an additional parking spot for every additional 2 bedrooms or fraction thereof.
I can move that.
Okay. And then I don't remember if this governing documents included this, that the governing document for the development require owners of the STR unit to utilize one singular property management company to handle all STR units, with the management company meeting all the requirements contained in the STR management companies included.
That was in the drafts of the,
Okay, so we can add that as a condition. of-
That was in the draft.
That's easy.
It's good to have it on there, right?
yeah,
And then,
but he hasn't done the CCNRs yet.
I have a draft of them.
yeah,
So our attorneys have worked on the draft.
So we'll
yeah,
add that as a
that's in there.
condition.
Okay.
And then the other one would be to allow the management company to evict tenants causing a nuisance violation in the governing documents.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Immediate eviction, I think is what was specified, immediate eviction.
Immediate eviction, yes. And then, one that wasn't discussed last time, prohibit interior cameras to protect guest privacy expectations.
That is fine as well. Yeah, that's fine.
Prohibit interior camera to protect guest privacy expectations.
You get to do that once. You put a generate an STR and the public finds out about it.
Yeah. You have to disclose that in your listings, like, no one, it's like a typical.
I'll accept that amendment to my.
And then the last one, I know that, well, so I'm not. Since it's no other residential, there are some, no rooftop decks on houses that are short-term rental. Last time the council had problems with that. Okay, so I won't propose that.
I accepted all your amendments.
Okay.
I was close.
Without the rooftop.
Without the
All right, so the motion is seconded. He accepted your amendments.
okay.
And you seconded the motion.
I seconded the motion.
Okay, and just that, as I did last time, I'm gonna vote against this. But this is consistent with my position last time, is that, I looked at the ordinance and I think the SDRs will not contribute to the general well-being of the neighborhood and the community. We got too many short-term rentals, not enough healthy stock. SDR contrary to the development of our general plan, chapter 6 on housing. It will contribute to the increase in housing prices, and decrease availability of housing stock available for long-term rental. And SDR is contrary to the general plan and will not encourage affordable housing options for families. I do have to say, out of all the short-term rentals overlay districts I've seen, this is probably the best fit, but I still don't think it meets all the requirements. So I'm going to vote no.
Steve, change your microphone closer.
I'm gonna vote yes, because I do feel like they have actually followed the procedures through their preliminary plat. And I feel like this is the time to put it on, so it's open and they've been very open if they wanted to do it, so yes.
So while I agree with Paul about the adverse effects of short-term rentals here in Virgin, this particular location, I feel, does not impact on neighboring residential developments, neighborhoods. So this particular one, I'm going to vote yes, because as I said, I don't see that it impacts neighbors, any neighboring neighborhoods, and he's done everything correct. So I vote yes.
I vote yes.
Any reason?
The same reason that you have.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to shorten this. Yeah.
I will vote yes, but I will just say I disagree with my partners on the council here, that I think that as this short-term rental world starts to become saturated, this does provide long-term housing options for our town. And we're seeing that already as places in St. George are already converting over because they can't fill with the short-term rentals. So I think it does provide an option for long-term rentals.
Okay. So that one. Now, don't forget, you have to come back next month to get an extension on the preliminary plans.
I'll get some clarification, because I think it was conditionally approved, so.
Let's see, I have from the planning commission, you mean, or the preliminary plan?
From,
It was an approval with condition,
yeah,
and
so technically not even.
No, it is, it's an approval condition, you need to give an extension on that.
All right, so just be sure and come back, get that on the agenda for an extension at our next town council meeting next month. Okay, so now we will move on to what was item A, which is the short-term rental overlay request by for Quail Mesa. So, discussion.
You got all.
Oh. Sure, any public comment before the. I really don't like doing that, but, okay.
Felix Benlove, I'll keep it short. It seems like there's a lot of, if it pleases the crown mentality that happens within our city. And I would hope that moving forward, we can clarify our ordinances to be very clear in what we want from our town. That way we have less things like this, and we can have more freedom for property owners. People own their property, they should be able to do what they like with it, as long as it's not impacting those around us, like we just learned with this water treatment study. It, you know, when somebody flushes down the toilet, it's gonna impact the person next door, and so it's important that we have those things that say, hey, we want this. So that we don't have these detrimental impacts, and things like that should be very clear, otherwise, the market's gonna take care of itself, and people can take a look at an area and be like, hey, I can be within these X, Y coordinates and these left and right limits, and do what I want. And we can have less on the agenda, and our time goes by faster, and people are more free and happy. Thank you.
Okay, so. But, oh, we're ready to start talking about item A, which is Quail Mesa. Yeah, that. So. The problem that I see with this one is that we do not have a preliminary plat on this case, in this situation. We have the concept plan that was submitted, and it's been on the agenda several times for a preliminary plat approval, but no preliminary plat has been submitted or approved. So this one is in a different situation from the one we just approved. So, those are my comments. They've done a traffic study and a slope. Was it a slope study? Is that what it was? Slope analysis?
Slope stability analysis.
Yeah, those two were done. But that is all that has been done. And I attached minutes from the different planning and zoning meetings.
Would you like to hear from the applicant as to what their timeline is? If we hear from the last applicant.
We can indeed. Any other comments from anybody else before I ask them?
Let them go from now.
Okay. So they want to know, what is your timeline?
Jeff Lee. So I had, again, the checklist I originally got from the town clerk was a little bit, has a little bit different timelines than what was in the town ordinances, where it has the conceptual plat versus preliminary plat versus final. And so part of the reason I applied for the short-term overlay before that was done is because my lawyer agrees it's a little ambiguous of when that can happen. And I'd rather be safe than sorry, especially with the way that things have looked the last few months. The preliminary plat, my slope analysis, my storm discharge, my soil samples, my geotechnical, those are all finished. The main thing my CPNRs are done now. The main thing I was waiting on, is I was waiting on a wastewater treatment, and I have to have a level, a class C, I'm not an engineer, but a class C wastewater treatment plant. They've done all the soil analysis, and this is something that started 7 months ago, and it is getting close to being done. I did not know I could apply for preliminary plat approval conditioned on wastewater treatment, or I could have applied months ago, but I've been waiting for that to finish. So really, what I would just say is, you know, if we apply for this short-term overlay, give me a 12-month window, kind of like we saw before, to get final plat, and then I know what I'm working in, and that helps, you know, say that's the deadline. And I'm fine with the other amendments that Mr. Louis, you know, mentioned, those are fine.
I think that is fine. I would say that we probably ought to put an additional condition that submittal of preliminary plat or application for preliminary plat be made within a certain period of time, and final plat recording be that year afterwards.
From the preliminary plat being approved or submitted.
So, on the
You
preliminary,
can't control the preliminary plat approval process at all. It's got to go to the planning commission.
it goes to
And,
planning.
and then comes to the council. So, but I think that if we put a deadline, you know, that the applicants apply for preliminary plat approval within 2 months, and that they have until 12, they have the additional final plat being reported within 1 year after preliminary plat approval. I think that would be the appropriate, because so that they're not caught in the timing of the town and its meeting schedule and approval process.
So one question I have, with seeing how the other subdivision had a preliminary plat approval condition, it was approved conditioned on a wastewater treatment or a, you know, septic design, where this is, I've been working on this 7 months. You know, I have every other step done except for that, and it's just, quite frankly, it's out of my control.
We've done it in the past. I'm not saying, can't,
Okay.
I'm not a voting member.
I'd be a lot more comfortable hearing that than saying I have to have my septic done in 2 months, because
As long, in my mind, as long as there's a location where that, you know, community system is going to be located on your preliminary plat, and you've got something indicating that it's just in the study and design process. I don't have a problem with that, because you're gonna have to have it done by the time so you can properly submit construction drawings. To be signed off by everybody's, and that's a final plat process. So yes.
Because we'll have a new condition to it in addition is the problem I have with trying to approve these short-term overlays before preliminary plat is we don't see what that looks like.
We don't know that.
We don't have the subdivision to look at. We haven't looked at what those conditions are.
Well, we have conceptual, but we, again,
But that's the key.
in a very preliminary,
Because you're
preliminary is where it's best.
Yeah.
There's some vested
I
right.
mean, the ordinances still dictate what the density can or can't be.
Yeah, but there's other
It's still
conditions.
allowed within the ordinance.
There's 2 ways that I think that this would work. One is we just delay this decision, you file the application, we table it until the preliminary plat's decided, and we have all that information you could look at it. Or the other one I was gonna suggest is if the council's on and going, it's not my preference, but if we go that way, is that we're allowed to impose new conditions related to short-term rentals at preliminary plat. And so what we'll be doing, that's why I don't want to wait, is we're adding new conditions to the zone change at preliminary plat approval. That seems backward. And I just table this. You're already in the proper, you've already filed. We're just table it in until you get the preliminary plat approval, and then you can come back. You don't even have to wait for final plat. At least we get to see what everything looks like.
I think we have opportunities though to revise. I mean, we don't have to approve the preliminary plat. There's things that don't meet the criteria. It says pretty clearly here in chapter.
But I'm looking at conditions related to.
No, I get that, but it says right here in our own ordinance, town council may, after receiving a recommendation from the zoning commission, approve, modify, or approve, or deny any application for STR development or zone designation. We've received from them an approval to do this. Land is being looked at, whether for them or other developers, and I don't even know where they're at in theirs, but when somebody has a piece of land and they're going to sell, these things matter in the sale of property. Now, granted, I have no problem with this being contingent upon a lot of things like completion and approval of the preliminary and final plat. If we don't approve the final plat because it's falling outside of ordinances or falling outside of things that we have already established, it falls back to rural residential, but to hold it up until we get to see stuff that they have to follow the ordinances on anyway. I
See, I don't consider it holding it up, because I read the ordinance of the right to seek this is really tied to final plat, and usually after preliminary plat. So in my view, is jumping the gun. My concern is it really puts us at a difficult step of trying to approve conditions related to the short-term rental after we've already granted the short-term rental.
But Paul, I look at the conditions that you just placed on the last one. That being, you know, off-street parking, that being.
I don't know what.
Yeah.
It's gonna look like them hold.
I get that, but what I'm saying is, I'm thinking about those conditions that you just added as a friendly amendment to the last zone change. And none of those were contingent on density. You think about that.
Yeah, no,
And you're expressing concern over that density could change in the preliminary plat. Lot sizes can't change, frontage can't change.
But the effect on the neighboring community, depending on how the preliminary plat is set up, could change. And one of the things that short-term rental ordinance allows us to do is impose conditions related from the preliminary plat. And I think we're going to be considering another short-term rental, and there are conditions that the neighborhoods brought up that I want to ensure is included in the short-term rental condition. So
I see you.
if we have an opportunity to impose other conditions, then that would be all right, but I don't see how we can really do that.
Let's ask the applicant, you want to have this table until your preliminary plat is approved.
I'll be honest, I'm really concerned about what I feel like is hostility towards my project and also just everything we can see to try to stop building and the short-term rental and everything else. I just feel like if I stall it, I've got 2 more months now where all guns are brought out against trying to stop this overlay from happening. This is something for, almost 2 years now. We've talked about this is what I could do with the land I bought. I'm asking for a zone change. It does state at final plat, but in another place it states when you apply for a zone change, it doesn't have to be tied. So I'm just concerned that if I prolong this, I'm just gonna have 5 more things brought up to try to stop it.
And see, that's where I kind of disagree with you, because it says at the time you can seek it at the time of preliminary plat.
Well, my attorney agrees that there's a lot of ambiguity there. And the problem with not being clear is I lose when they vote against it. So.
I think it's clear on new developments. And you don't have a new development, you don't even have vested rights on a new development until you have preliminary plat. So, but we're trying to accommodate your early request, I guess I would say. Because of the current climate and the need, that we're looking closely at all aspects of short-term rentals within the town. So I can appreciate your concern for delay, and we're trying to be accommodating on things that are in the pipe.
So I guess I would be comfortable putting off the zone change until the preliminary plat approval. Based off the fact that I could have the same rules and standards applied to me today that were applied to the other people with zone change.
You mean with the one we just did?
Yes.
then I would be comfortable with it, because I don't feel like I could have anything changed on it.
Well, I'll let you guys look at that in motion table.
How far off are you on your preliminary plat?
It's wastewater treatment, so if I can get approval
You
based on,
need to fill the location.
I can show the location of it right now, I just thought I had to have it. The final plans for it, and it is, you know, it's a class 3, but if I show location, I can apply for, well, I missed the 10-day window, and I might have to go to the public hearing again, correct, Crystal?
Yeah.
Am I too late for the 10-day postings for the next planning and zoning? Well, I probably missed this one, I would say the next, not the next planning and zoning, but the one following that,
Yeah.
I would be right.
Cause like you said, the previous one, we felt like they followed all the steps, and their septic's drawn on here, or not drawn on here, but it shows where it's gonna be, and then their plat was done on condition of that.
Okay, well, I thought I had to have it finalized,
Right.
but I can apply for it, I just don't.
The
To
preliminary
me,
plat.
the actual sizing and design of that treatment, that's part of your construction plans that
Okay.
are submitted. You know.
But I would say-
With your final plan.
I missed this one,
Thursday by noon.
Thursday by noon, and I would have to have. I don't know if I'm gonna get that, I'm gonna say,
I was gonna say, I
I'd say
don't think you
the
will.
following planning and zoning, I would go for my preliminary, yeah,
April.
April, I would go for the preliminary plat approval.
So that it could be on the April council,
Or April planning and zoning.
and if they recommended, can it
Yeah,
be
then
on the
April,
April council?
Yeah.
We'd have to do public hearing, and that gives the public hearing.
Public hearing,
That would have to go out. of public
Yeah.
notice.
Okay, so April,
And you can run the short-term rental at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, run both at the same time.
so if you want to table it, or, table this until. April's meeting, and that the standards as they exist for short-term rental right now would apply. I think that would be some clarity for you. I'll move we table this, April with the standards that apply for short-term rentals will apply at that time.
Is he missing something?
No, I'm waiting for a second before I ask my question. Are you, I would have preferred up until he submits preliminary plat, but if you're gonna submit preliminary plat in April, I'm all right with that motion.
yeah, we can submit.
In time to be on.
Yeah, I can, is that 2 days, you may not do it, but
Yeah.
now I have, in a sense,
30 days.
yeah, 30 days.
You're comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that, so.
Just for discussion, since before we vote, I would like to ask, since, well, I don't see Cameron anymore, but I'd like to ask the commission, we got 2 members of the commission. To address that and make a change that says we don't accept the STR overlay until preliminary plat is issued, otherwise we're just gonna go through this again.
Yeah.
So that's section, let me just give you that and we'll have it on the record. 60.02, which is short-term rental. Section number. Oh, shit. Section number 4, or section number 5. The 5th, no.
Is there an A or a B before that?
3A maybe?
I'm sorry, C5.
C5.
That's the one that I was looking at, discussed, to say, look, you have a right to request this because it's been approved by commission. We need to just change it to say after preliminary plat.
I'll take it as a no. We can look at it.
So C5,
There's a lot of changes happening. So.
you guys need to be faster. Understood.
So we're, okay, so we had a motion, we had a second. So,
The table's going to go.
yes, so we have to vote on that. Ms. Jean,
No,
about,
that's just, I'm kind of like, I don't understand, like,
He's making a statement.
all right,
yeah, just.
Leroy,
Yes.
Jean, yes. Misty,
Yes.
Yeah.
Paul,
Thank you.
next is Alan Lee. Zone change. we'll let you know when we need you up there.
I would just want to get up there to the microphone, you know.
Getting that all down on my.
Okay, so, this is the zone change for Allen from, rural residential, to highway resort zone. For his 2 parcels that are up behind, cross the river, go up Camino del Rio and back that way. So we have a letter from someone raising what I consider a valid issue, which is that our code, our town code says, I had it here. I thought I had a column, I thought I had a. That page? This is the- Yes. You might as well come up. Instead of me trying to talk to you way back here. Okay, so when we talk about the parcels that are eligible to be highway resort zone. We had there's one section that says, section 3. Lie within the area for the grid line 700 east. To the furthest east and south town boundary. And the problem is.
To the furthest what now?
East and south town boundary.
Well, it didn't include that, it was just that 107 acres.
No, what the problem is that the 107 acres that is on your map, some of it goes further west than
Further
700
east?
further west
Oh, yeah, some of
than
it.
700 east.
Yeah, but that's not being applied for,
So,
unless you want to give it to me.
no.
I didn't think you would.
So would that be split zoning parcel,
Yes,
but, which I've never been a proponent of, except for if there is a bona fide landmark or methodology. And a grid line, if we're talking about a survey grid line. Then I would probably be fine with that.
I have no idea if there's a survey grid line. I know it's on a map.
There is.
There
is a property line that runs right up along the west edge of that,
The west edge of what?
Camino del Rio. Between me and Stuart Berger, there's a property line runs right directly south. And everything from that property line east or west, east is what we were applying for.
Okay, because the map shows all the way over to, unless I'm misreading them.
I think the map includes the whole piece.
Yeah,
Carol-
it's,
Carol Getz property.
yes, it does.
Yeah,
It
it's
has,
not
it
posted.
includes it all the way over to what was Linda's.
Yeah,
Linda's
and it wasn't supposed to, it was just supposed to be from Camino, because that was not a proposed. Highway resort zone area back this way.
Correct,
It was all just up that other way.
okay. Because the ordinance that had enacted the 700 east boundary had at first said that it would be Camino del Rio and east. And then there was a sentence on there that said, but our preference is to use 700 east.
Yeah.
And then go east. And so it's been put in as 700 east.
Well, 700 east is where the property line is.
Okay. And it's right there by the bridge,
Just as you turn
yeah,
to come back to Rio Visión,
uh-huh,
if you look, there's a fence line right there, it goes right up the hill.
yes,
And that way, and
Uh-huh.
everything on that side, although it's still mine,
uh-huh,
it's west of the boundary.
Okay.
Everything east is part of the property that we're talking about.
okay.
Does that fence run up On the east side of the tower.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's not.
Just there.
Yeah, 700.
well, it's pretty close to it, isn't it?
Well,
I think it is. I think it's.
you can see it both on this map, look at this map, 700's there, and your fence is running.
Well, that fence may not be right on the money.
It's a satellite.
I know it's.
It's close. This one here, Chris.
This map, it was on the thing from Lauren, the email from Lauren. Well, it's the very last page on there. So yeah, it's just a little bit around the corner.
Yeah,
And so yes, there's a fence right there that kind of goes up and around
Yeah.
over the hill some.
yes,
Okay, so you're only talking from there and going east.
east, yes.
Okay. But some of it is still on that same parcel. So we would.
Well, it may
Split
be on
zoning
the same parcel, I mean, but we
But
just
if,
have.
but if the 700 east grid line is sufficient for our ordinance,
Uh-huh.
it should be sufficient for designating the split zoning on a parcel.
So do we not have to like split the parcel or anything like that?
Well,
No?
now you see parcel split zones all the time. I'm not a fan of it because unless you have a landmark or some way of designating where one starts or one ends and the next one starts, you get into a problem. And I've been involved in a dispute with, between a municipality and a landowner based on where the municipality's engineer drew their zoning map. It didn't correlate with what they thought that the zoning was. We went back to the original zoning application and the property owner was actually correct. So my opinion has been, if there is a bona fide landmark, physical landmark, or if there's some sort of survey point of reference, like a grid line, a section line, something like that, then that's probably sufficient, because there's really no question at that point in time what portion of the parcel is zoned what, so.
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I know Stuart Burgers comes
Mhm.
down to the 700. On, because I have to go across to get it to my back property. And everything from that property line east would be what we're talking about.
That's from 700.
Yeah, it'd be 700.
And so 700 east, that line would be sufficient for it to do that.
come look at this map and tell me if you think the 700 east is actually northeast.
Well, I'm not sure. This is what they got 700.
Yeah.
There's a fence.
Right.
But actually, the fence is right there.
Yes, yeah.
700 east is right. There's your tower.
There's a.
So that is actually the cell tower in that piece. Yes.
Okay,
And this is what we wanted, you said 700 east.
okay. I just want to make sure you thought that was the right place for that.
Well, I think that's the way the city shot it from 700, and that's fine.
I just wanted to be sure, what do you recommend is the
If we
best?
use, if we use 700 east, then that's so satisfied feet and.
Okay, everybody.
So the county's GIS department,
Hey, Joanne,
the county's GIS department, we've given them an addressing grid. They can pull you a map. I don't think it's one that you can, like, just the public can pull under from their interactive maps, but they can pull you a map and show you the grid lines.
Okay.
From where addresses are, yes, he's got, I think, a hard copy of that in the office. And yes, that in my mind is a sufficient surveying location that we can split the zoning across the
Okay.
parcel.
Okay,
We don't have anything that says in our ordinance that we can't split zone. I would not recommend it unless there is a physical monument barrier, like a road or a surveying type feature like a grid line, an addressing grid line.
okay.
I like to say, I wouldn't be a bit opposed to including that other piece. Well, it take the whole piece. Yeah, heck yeah, I'm easy. Just
a little bit of information, the reason that this doesn't meet a lot of the highway resort zone ordinances. But the reason we went ahead and done this piece over here was because everybody in town, especially on the west side of town, wanted all the business over here.
On the east, yeah.
And we don't have anything left along the highway. And that particular piece of ground makes it so that it's not affecting anybody residential on any direction except maybe a little bit on the west for future development. But as right now, there is no other development of any kind that property touches or will affect, so.
Doesn't that touch the new Cyan Edge?
The what?
Cyan
Edge.
No.
Signs, which one's that?
That's the one between me and the staple.
Oh, well, yeah, but the Zion Bed will be on the west side of it.
But it doesn't borderline with it.
What's the proximity to it?
It won't,
On one side, you were right. It's
Yeah,
just barely.
that.
You're just a little tiny bit down at the bottom.
between that and 700.
And that's just, that piece right along the road right there as you come off the bridge.
When you come around right there, so we just.
Just right.
It's just on the north side of the road there. Would be the only places.
Yeah, other than that, the rest of it. And Furber's
was gonna say.
developed.
It's a hill, you're not really so.
Yeah,
And then fall into the river.
Alan,
Yes,
if they need permission from us, because it barely touches the edge of one of our lots, that's okay with us.
No, we were just getting accurate, that's all.
yeah. And like I said, and that was the whole idea about just going ahead and making that a potential resort area, because we had run clear out of stuff along the highway and do anything with it.
Okay,
Any other questions? Yeah.
nope. Stay close. I will take a proposal.
I propose that we accept item C as zone change from rural residential to highway resort.
Second. Thought it was gonna be more.
You thought there would be.
I thought he was gonna say more.
Oh, then just that. Right, Paul?
Just want to make sure we're clear because I apologize, I have to step off.
Yeah, you just did a lot of this.
Yeah, so I'll be clear that that's everything east and that the zone change ordinance reflects that.
Yes, that it will be 700 and
Okay, so there's no need to amend it and make it clear.
that's what he said.
Because it's like. They're
It's fast approaching that residential area that always concerns me, but I'll vote aye.
Missy. Aye. Jean, yes. Leroy,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes. Oh, yes, first, you down. People must really.
That's when I talk loud.
no, we just like you, Alan. Okay, next item D is the zone change for observation estates subdivision from rural residential to short-term rental overlay. So, oh, no, Ryan said he had, it's gonna be out of town.
I'm representing Ryan.
Oh, you are? Okay. So.
Well, everybody's reading, can I just ask a question?
Sure, go ahead and ask. I'm not.
not gonna be well versed, right?
I just want to know if the amendments that Mr. Louis is suggesting on the other ship and then also that would be acceptable as well. Ron Lewis.
Yes,
Trying to gain the things that you mentioned in that last amendment. that you did.
yes, and I was part of writing CCNRs.
It was everything that we had, put on yours were right with the parking and
But
the,
you never included the privacy of,
oh, the
cameras.
cameras was not there.
And I would say I'm writing the caveats.
And then I have some other ones, potential ones, but on here, I was expecting them.
Okay. I was just concerned and Ethan and I have talked about this.
Well, I've got a concern in addition to I think what you're gonna discuss, Raymond. I have now reviewed the observation state CCNRs. And Jeff, even though you're involved with them, you remember we made some modifications to designs and edge to have it track the language of our ordinances. I think theirs is deficient, so I would request that we put a condition there on them amending their governing documents to clearly contain the requirements of our ordinance that they have uniform property management, singular property management with things like rights of immediate eviction, those types of things. It just says in their CPRs that short-term rentals can be done.
Right, exactly.
And I think
Just
that
one
was part of
phrase.
my one on Zion's landing was that they include that management according to our ordinance and the right of immediate.
And Zion's Edge did that. Jeff put it almost
Yeah.
wholesale,
Yeah.
right in there in a section of their CCNRs. But observations states doesn't have that level of detail that I would prefer. And that I think our ordinance, our short-term rental overlay zone ordinance requires to be in their governing documents. So I would say in addition to the conditions you guys have been making on the other two, that it'd be a condition that they have to amend their ordinance or amend their CCNR to include the compliance requirements in chapter 60.
And then there was some discussion about a privacy wall. And I was trying to figure out exactly where that was done by Sharon Baker.
Oh, yes, fair enough, but that was private.
Privacy wall, yes. And I would like that, you get which one, where do you want it?
There, I believe, let's see,
Those two.
these two right there. It's those two.
How you do a privacy zone?
Yeah, it's in their street, can be there.
That's the street right there.
That street has blank property on it.
But those are the two properties there in the back. That one,
There's what about the one on the other side?
so here,
Yeah.
that's, Lyman.
On that. And Sharon wanted a wall on that. But there's no street there yet, is there?
No, that's.
It just comes
dirt.
down and then turns.
I mean, you can see where there could be one eventually, but it's undeveloped.
Yes.
It's just a dirt road right now.
During our while, I would suggest that we include a property wall that.
What do you
was
think?
suggested.
What do you think, Ryan, will think on that?
I think you would say no, for a number of reasons, but probably the biggest one is he's already sold those two lots, so he no longer owns those.
1 and 4.
Correct, he only owns the lot 2.
Yeah.
Requirements for.
No.
To satisfy their.
No, it's not where it's at now. And it looks like,
If not, then we were gonna get requests from.
yeah.
Everybody.
I guess,
For their shopping list. of what they
Yeah,
want.
and I guess that's-
Place to look.
And that kind of illustrates where we are in the process. If it was brought earlier than we could have done so. The only other concern I have is there a potential suit from the neighbors for maybe some type of taking. For any depreciation due to taking their property without due process. In other words, we didn't ever do a hearing on the final plat. So what I'm thinking is maybe we should do a corrected final plan, make that a condition of the zone change.
I don't think that we want to open that Pandora's box. It's a recorded final plat. We couldn't put in additional conditions of approval on it. And try and, I don't know that that corrects anything by doing a corrected process only. But if someone's gonna make some sort of case explain, let them make their case explain, in my opinion.
No, I was just thinking about,
We go through the process of having a motion made and then having this standard amendments.
we could do that. I was just,
That's my one amendment too.
no, I was just thinking about the CCNR, about, the pending ordinance from planning and board outside. Should anything be in the CCNR that, I mean, that's gonna be coming probably the next 2 to 3 months.
If that's attached to the permitting process,
Yeah,
then it shouldn't matter.
Yeah,
That's what I know. Should it be the CCNRs or should it just be part of the permitting process?
part of the permitting process.
Okay, all right. Okay, then I'll take a
All right,
look.
I'll make a motion to approve. What's the name of the subdivision? Observation Estates,
Short-term rental.
short-term overlay. With this as part of the ordinance that is that to amend, there was, part of the conditions that they amend their 16 notice to mirror and include our governing documents as they are currently there.
Yeah, our governing document requirements in chapter 60.
So said.
So the motion is to approve with my requested condition.
Would that include the conditions we imposed on the earlier?
No, you will.
No, you have that.
You want me to amend that?
So we need a second on the motion and then you can.
Second.
Motion to amend that each house that will have 3 off-street parking spots, and if more than 4 bedrooms, an additional parking spot for every additional 2 bedrooms, subtraction thereof. Motion shall include that the governing documents of the development require owners of the PR unit to utilize one single property management company to handle all STR units, which management company shall meet all the requirements pertaining to STR management companies in Google. I think it's similar to what Keith was saying, to allow the management company to evict tenancies of tenants immediately that cause a nuisance violation and prohibit interior cameras to protect guest privacy expectations.
I accept that.
I'd like to amend it that they pay for their share of the roads as originally agreed in the plat and this CUP. They have not paid that yet. They have been billed.
That's 190,000.
So it's reasonable to me.
I'll accept that amendment as well.
Okay, I've got one question, one potential amendment. That also has to do with payment of fees, which is the drainage issue that we have worked out between the town and the Observation State subdivision about
Yeah.
for the drainage that is eroding some of the property at Zion White Bison. They pay their 50% share of the agreement that we came up with the other day.
Yeah, we haven't memorialized it yet. I'm just trying to think how we would.
I don't know if we can add that as an amendment, since we are in the process of looking at that, getting that signed by everybody, but I wanted to bring it up.
Can fees be held up? I mean, can an STR overlay, that's my question, I'm thinking about this now too. Yeah, we hold up an STR overlay based on fees. We'll put ourselves in the.
No, that's not an unfair exaction. That's directly related to the development.
Just ask.
Yes.
And it don't have to be plans with all the ordinances, be pretty frank, permits, too.
Always.
I would say on the drainage issue, we reached a tentative agreement. It was something that was post subdivision approval or quasi. I would probably just say that
Leave it alone.
we've got a tentative agreement in order to reduce some writing, so let's not try to deal with it here.
Okay, all right.
An outstanding invoice for $109,000. Road that's already been paid for, and should be dealt with.
All right. We need a second on the amendments, the motion.
I'll second the amendment, to the motion.
All right,
So we're voting on amendments first, or would they accept it?
They're accepting it. and so we're ready to vote on this SPR overlay zoning. So, Paul.
Be consistent with all my previous ones, I'm not gonna read them, but all the ones that I read into the record, please make sure when you do the minutes, are included as the reason for it. Well, you know,
Okay, Misty, oops.
I'm gonna vote yes. For all the reasons we stated in our conversation.
Okay. I'm going to vote no, because I just feel this impacts a nearby residential neighborhood. Too much. Leroy,
I vote yes.
Jean,
I will, yes.
okay.
I think that's the only correct place.
Don't say that as the reason.
Okay, so,
Where can I get that checklist to make sure you take care of it?
Crystal?
As soon as she gets the minutes done,
There's not a good
Just drafted.
I'll also make it clear to him that I will never send it again.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
now,
Jeff, I can send them to you and Ryan via email.
so the next step on the agenda for, under new business, item E. Yes, well, I was good, okay.
We can put it like on. Well,
Was this posted on SharePoint or anything? That's still.
No.
No.
The three.
Yeah, I will say to the three members who heard the appeal.
Oh,
Further feedback I got, and I received feedback from Paul, and if there's any feedback that the other two of you want to give tonight, but if you'd like, I think the process, we had an executive session to deliberate and discuss the issues, come to a general consensus on it, and then I've attempted to reduce the council's feelings or rulings into writing which they want to adopt tonight, so if I can.
so after you read this, it says discussion and possible approval up.
Yeah.
So then we got to read the.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
What? No, you want to give me? So.
Oh, is that it? Is that one page?
He added the one condition.
Oh, okay, all right. I said that before, but.
Yeah, the one condition.
Okay. So, this is the memorandum decision, the appeal, the conditional use permit issued to Zion Sunset Holdings LLC dated December 22nd, 2022.
Lean closer to your mic.
Okay,
There you go.
you're welcome, Paul.
I didn't put it up there, so you don't have it, but do you want me to put it up there?
So they're hearing it from me, they can read it. They're very long.
Right.
Yeah. Now it's on.
Yeah, now it's on. I was gonna say, everything was on. a minute ago.
All right, there it is.
Okay, maybe zoom out so they can see just a little more. Introduction, this matter came before the Virgin County Council on the Orange County neighborhood was collectively the appellant's appeal of a conditional use permit issued by Virgin Town, and I don't have my glasses, so if I miss any of this, I'm splitting to read.
It is a different way.
Okay,
Issued to Zion Sunset Holding LLC, a Utah Limited Liability Company referred to as permittee on December 22nd, 2022, relating to 7.88 acres of real property located at approximately 400 West State Route 9 in Virgin, Utah, known as Parcel 7 of the Zion White Buffalo Resort. And described more fully, I think I deleted out the final version. We're not putting the actual legal description in there, so. But it's that piece. In early December 2022, representatives of permitting began meeting with Zion Town zoning administrator Gene Garati, hereinafter zoning administrator, regarding permittee's desire to amend the conditional use permit previously issued by the town on November 29th. It should be 2021, not.
yeah, not 2000.
Not 2001. Regarding the subject property and then here and after the prior parcel 7 CUP, the prior parcel 7 CUP allowed committee to construct and operate a hotel and motel on the subject property instead of a singular hotel motel use. Committee desired to amend the prior parcel 7 CUP to have a new one issued that would allow for the construction and maintenance of 5 30-foot tall mansion style buildings containing lodging units of varying size that could either be utilized in.
Yes.
Yeah, I really need my glasses. Utilized as a hotel motel or as a short-term rental condominiums owned by a single owner or by multiple owners and managed by one property management company, as well as a shuttle stop and a community laundry facility. After multiple meetings, the zoning administrator felt comfortable with the commitments of permitting on both parcel 7 and throughout the Zion White Bison Resort, sufficient to warrant the density bonuses on the subject parcel and a bonus height increase in the buildings from the town's current 25-foot height limitation to 30 feet. The permittee then had its legal counsel draft the body of the subject conditional use permit and provided it to the zoning administrator for further review and possible modification. The subject conditional use permit contained multiple exhibits consisting of exhibit A, a meets and bounds legal description of parcel 7 and parcel 10, commonly referred to by the parties as the open space parcel. Exhibit B, an overall site plan for Zion White Bison Resort and a development plan for parcel 7. Exhibit C, which is condominium floor plan plans for the various size buildings, and exhibit D, a signage plan for the Zion White Buffalo Resort. Exhibits B, C, and D contain various notations and legends. Because the prior parcel 7 CUP and even an earlier CUP relating to parcel 7 had been issued as a level 1 CUP, and because the prior parcel 7 CUP permitted a use that was similar to those identified in the subject CUP, the zoning administrator determined that the subject CUP should be processed as a level 1 CUP pursuant to section 16.04 of the Virginia Uniform Land Use Ordinance, hereinafter referred to as BULU. Accordingly, the zoning administrator arranged a time with the representative of the permittee to meet him at the Virgin Town Office on December 22nd, 2022, during normal business hours, to have permittee submit a simple application and pay the town's CUP application fee, and have everything received by the town clerk recorder. When the permittee representative and the zoning administrator arrived at Virgin Town offices, they learned that the area had been subject to a power grid outage, and that as such, the town's mayor had sent the town clerk recorder home for the remainder of the afternoon, with the town offices closed. The zoning administrator and the zoning administrator prepared to sign a revised version of the subject CUP. The permittee representative and the zoning administrator decided to appear before another person who was a notary public and have the subject CUP signed and notarized that afternoon, with the intention that the application fee check and the actual permit with exhibits would be signed and considered issued when properly lodged with the town clerk recorder. On December 29th, 2022, the town clerk recorder posted notice of the issuance of the subject CUP on the Utah Public Notice website and uploaded a copy of the subject CUP on January 5th, 2023 at a special town council meeting. The town clerk recorder was given the entirety of the subject CUP application packet consisting of the application form, the check for the CUP application fee, and a copy of the subject CUP that had already been signed and notarized. On January 6th, 2023, appellants submitted their appeal. Because of the timeliness of the appeal, the town scheduled a special meeting for February 10th, 2023 at 1 p.m. for the purpose of having a hearing on the appeal, hereinafter referred to as the appeal hearing. The town gave notice and of the appeal hearing to the applicant and the permittee, informing them that they had the opportunity to be present with legal counsel if they desired, and present the facts and their legal arguments as to why the subject CUP should be affirmed, modified, or denied. At the outset of the appeal hearing, Gene Barati, who is not only the town's zoning administrator, but also a member of the town council, recused himself. Mayor Jean Krause also chose to recuse herself, as the permittee had previously, both in a private written letter and in a public meeting, accused or asserted that she was biased and incapable of providing a fair and balanced vote on future land use entitlements relating to the Zion White Buffalo Resort. The recusals left the town council with 3 voting members to hear the appeal. The town council member, one town council member made a motion that the appeal be dismissed as the appellants did not have standing under a newly enacted section of the Utah Municipal Code governing appeals. Give the citation and a newly adopted term in the Utah Municipal Code that defines who is a adversely affected party capable of bringing an appeal of a land use decision. After further discussion on the motion, the town council determined to table the motion to the end of the appeal hearing, and after both the appellant and the permittee, and allow the appellant committee to provide them with facts and arguments regarding the issue of standing and the substantive merits of the appeal. After nearly 4 hours of oral argument, and it was nearly 4 hours of argument and testimony. Town council took the matter under advisement. Town council allowed both parties to submit a short and concise supplemental brief on the issue of whether the recent inclusion of the term adversely affected party in Utah Code annotated and the provisions found recently in the Utah Code annotated 109A7031, which limited the persons or entities capable of appealing a land use decision to just the applicant, the municipality, or an adversely affected party, was an attempt by Utah State Legislature to expressly overturn the common interest doctrine found in Utah case law. So that's the background. The decision is that the appeal of the subject CUP brought by the appellants is hereby dismissed on the grounds that the appellants lack standing to bring an appeal, as they have failed to carry their burden of proof and show that under Utah Code annotated 109A7031 that they are an adversely affected party as a result of the subject CUP. As such, the substantive merits of appellants' alleged error in the issuance of the subject CUP need not be addressed. Likewise, because no other persons or parties have brought an appeal within 15 days of when the subject CUP was issued and properly lodged with the town, said CUP is hereby affirmed. So the findings of fact behind this is that the permittee is the owner of the subject property. Permittee lodged the application for the subject CUP with the town on January 5th, when the town clerk was provided with the CUP application form filled out in part by the permittee. The check made payable to the town for the CUP application fee and the subject CUP with exhibits no longer in draft form, but rather already executed by the zoning administrator pursuant to section 1604 F4 of Boogaloo. All appeals of level 1 CUPs must be lodged with the town within 15 days of the termination of said permit. On January 6, 2023, the appellants filed their appeal of the subject CUP. The town properly set, noticed, and conducted the appeal hearing on the validity of the subject CUP on February 10th, 2023 at 1 p.m. At the appeal hearing, the appellants were given multiple opportunities over the course of the 4-hour hearing to present argument as to why they had standing to appeal. Specifically, the appellants were given an opportunity at the appeal hearing to articulate whether Utah Code annotated 109A1032 and 109A7031 enacted effective May 12, 2020 applied to their appeal, and if it did, how they satisfied the requirements of Utah Code annotated 109A1032 subsections A through B. In support of their claims, defending appellants asserted that the two main arguments in both their hearing brief and their oral argument were as follows. A, the town had previously set precedent of third-party standing in Timmerman v. Virgin Town, decided in 2019, and B, that they had standing pursuant to the public interest doctrine as articulated in Gregory v. Shurtleff. And I give the citation for that and the other case that decided. Conclusions of law, notwithstanding the fact that the subject CUP was signed by the zoning administrator on December 22nd, it cannot be deemed to be issued and determined until it was properly lodged with the town council, which both parties stipulate occurred on January 5th, 2023. Two, the appellants timely filed their appeal regarding the issuance of the subject CUP on January 6th. Notwithstanding the timeliness of their appeal, appellants have the burden of proof pursuant to Utah Code annotated 109A705 and Boogaloo section 1606A and 16612H to show that they have standing to bring their appeal, notwithstanding the fact that Boogaloo 1604, section 1604D7 and 1606A only requires a third party wanting to appeal the issuance of the conditional use permit to be an affected party. This requirement is less stringent than Utah Code annotated sections 10.9A 1032 and 10.9A 703, which requires the affected third party to be adversely affected, to be an adversely affected party, meaning that they must own property adjacent to the subject property or suffer damages or injury that is different or distinct from the damages and injuries sustained by the general community where the subject CUP is issued. Pursuant to the supremacy clause of the Utah Constitution, a municipality only has powers which have been properly delegated to it by the state of Utah. In State v. Hutchinson, and give the citation, the Utah Supreme Court summarized the preemption doctrine by saying local governments are without authority to pass any ordinance prohibited by or conflict with state statutory law. Utah Code annotated 10.9A 1032 and 10.9A 703 is more restrictive than Bulu section 1604 G7 and 1606A, and therefore preempts the latter. Utah Code annotated 10.9A 1032 and 10.9A 703 were enacted and became effective prior to the issuance or appeal of the subject, therefore controls regarding the issue of third-party standing. Supplemental briefs provided by the appellants and the permittee do not indicate conclusively one way or the other that the intent partially or fully behind the Utah State Legislature's adoption of the term adversely affected party was to statutorily overturn the public interest doctrine found in Utah case law. Research performed by the town attorney at the request of the members of the town council hearing the appeal indicates that there is no public appellate case law in the state of Utah where the public interest doctrine was applied in the context of determining third-party standing to appeal a county or a municipality's land use decision. Therefore, the town council concludes that there is no legal basis to apply the common law doctrine in this situation, and that to do so would undermine the standing limitations expressly set forth in Utah Code 10.9A 1032. The town is not, number 11, the town is not bound by Timmerman v. Virgin Town CUP appeal decision rendered by the town's appeal authority in 2019, because at the time of Timmerman's decision was rendered in 2019, Utah's municipal code did not contain the term and standing requirements for an adversely affected party. B, at the time the Timmerman decision was rendered in 2019, conditional use permits did not have level designations and were all issued by the town council, with any appeals being made to the town appeal authority, not the town council acting as the appeal authority. And C, in the context of interpreting and enforcing land use regulations in municipalities, prior actions cannot constitute a precedent or a waiver of the right to interpret and enforce the same differently in the future. Well, appellant acknowledged that at the appeal hearing that they both do not have own property that is adjacent to subject property or any part of the White Bison Resort. Appellants failed to clearly and convincingly articulate any damages or injuries that they or their household have or will incur that is different and distinct from those damages or injuries that would be suffered by the general community as a result of the subject CUP. Now, the concluding statement that the council wanted included was, notwithstanding the decision and the findings and conclusions contained herein, the town council acknowledges that chapter 16 of title 10 of the condition and conditional use section needs further refinement as to the process and standards under which conditional use permits are issued by the town. And thanks to the appellant in initiating the appeal and spotlighting certain deficiencies, the town council is committed to analyzing and making necessary amendments to chapter 16 in the immediate future. so iffy, so.
Can you change it to version 10? also?
Yeah, that one is, I have changed it, there's an updated version of that, people of the older version. I know.
Okay.
Yeah, that is the one that says. But after I got feedback from Paul, let's make it version. Yeah, let's make it version. So is there any other feedback that, the members of the council who heard the, appeal have any changes they would like to it, or would you just like a motion to approve the memorandum decision as read with the change from on the signature line to Virgin Town Gas? And the two grammatical errors.
Yeah, there's 2001.
Yeah, it's 2021.
Before we make the motion, I'm asked to say what I'm going to say anyway, whether it's right before the vote or not. Lauren's not here, but April is. So
He's online.
what's that?
He's watching.
Okay, good. Please feel free to talk to me afterwards about anything in particular related to this hearing. And what you both did is argue and presented that there are zoning violations and we didn't follow our ordinances, therefore we're not following the law. And the only way I can grant that is if I do what you would be accusing the town of by not following state law. So put me in it really is one, in order to follow the law, I have to vote for this. And during the hearing, I asked a number of questions to try to get you to standing, and except for myself testifying, I couldn't get you there. So there's no factual basis in which to go any other way than this. My other comment would be to Jared. And I already said this to you, and when I mentioned it to you before, way before the appeal was even brought, Billy Preston song, nothing for nothing equals nothing. I sure hope it would be voluntary on your part, but I sure hope that you would agree to maybe some floor on that condition, so you have a percentage that would be long-term rental as a matter, because Cyril is Cyril.
I'll propose that we accept the following decision. But I'd also like to thank those that sponsored the appeal for bringing things to our attention that needs to be handled. We have a second.
Oh, second.
Let's take a vote. Paul?
Aye.
Misty?
Yes, and I want to echo a lot of Paul's comments that I'm really glad they brought forth our attention to our CUP process. We definitely need to change, and I think the ones for that, and I think the defendant for being well prepared as well. So, yes.
I'll vote yes. And like I said, I appreciate the things that were brought forward, and we need to refine that CUP process.
So just for the benefit of April and if Lauren is online, and to the committee, if either one of you disagree with the ruling issue, you do have the ability to pursue a further appeal list to district court. I think under our ordinances, it's required to be done within 30 days. That's all, so we can move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, it is 9:10. I am proposing that these next two items be continued to table to next month. But see what you guys.
Can I just do one note? This would be something, can we have a appeal process attached to this last item G? Maybe revise that for the next.
You mean you want to review it and make some
No,
changes?
no, if an applicant for funds gets denied by the three people that applied to the job, it would have some sort of remedial process. I'm gonna appeal or video and right.
If they get denied. What do you think, Paul? It was your proposal.
You know, I'm saying, so the town clerk, the town council, if they deny somebody, they have another.
Yes, so the way that process was, in my way of visioning it, is it could be done by people accepting applications or submitting applications, but more likely it would be triggered just by circumstances of delinquent funds coming. And we would never know who the person was because it would be account numbers provided to us unless they made an application.
So they do the application and then we just related. Just give you follow up.
If they submitted an application,
If they just have an appeal process, if the three people deny their request for them.
I don't have a problem with.
So do you want to?
Yeah, I can figure out.
I know it's not much.
Yes, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I'll make a motion to table items F and B until the regular. And knowledge. And motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Okay. So what are we working on? Yeah, okay. Number 8. And we have our work team connect that. Well, yeah, well, we sat here, we sat here. Meeting one of them, that's when we heard one of them in the house. But it needs to be. What's Yeah.
It seemed better than I do.